Dreaming up your ideal retirement is your job. Helping you get there is the job of Edward Jones. Your Edward Jones financial advisor, Lenny Bakken, CFP, can help you build a strategy to help your finances keep up with your retirement needs over the long haul. And remember, April 18th is around the corner. That's tax filing deadline this year. Lenny encourages you to contribute to an Edward Jones IRA or Roth IRA by April 18th to take advantage of potential tax benefits for 2016 and give your money more time to potentially grow. Look up Lenny's Facebook business page for regular investment updates. That's EJ Advisor Lenny Bakken, Bakken. To help you make sense of your retirement goals before the April 18th tax deadline, call Lenny at 1-877-597-2661. Tell him that Bruce and Conrad sent you for a free consultation to discuss your financial goals. That's 1-877-597-2661. Call today. Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
This is the MLW Radio Network.
From the territories to Titan Towers to TNA and all points in between, he's seen and done it all. And now he's here to share the real story behind wrestling's biggest moments, controversies, and characters. The MLW Radio Network presents Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with. Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I am absolutely excellent, man. It's a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day, and we're going to start this week off with a bang. We're going to do something we've never done before, Bruce, and I guess technically this doesn't make us men of our word. It makes us liars, but we're doing something we've never done before to start the show this week.
Well, yeah, because Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard, there are no guests needed, by God. And, well, actually, it's not really a guest, Conrad, because a guest is someone that you have to like, right?
Well, I guess.
So, but we're going to start off with welcoming someone to the family. Let's put it that way, because you sure as hell don't have to like your own family. Well, at least in my family, we don't.
Well, they say you don't get to pick your family, but you get to pick your friends, and we've picked a great one. We're going to welcome him to the MLW Radio family. It's the voice of wrestling below the Mason-Dixon line from 1983 to 2001. Tony Schiavone is now a part of the MLW Radio family. What's going on, Tony? How are you?
Hey, Conrad, and hey, Bruce. And I just want to say I don't like you fuckers either.
Well, we're starting off on the right foot with a salty goddamn attitude. We don't tolerate that kind of language here on Something to Wrestle with. By God, you fucking asshole.
I am sorry, sir. Actually, Bruce, it's great to be talking to you again. And Conrad, you were my grandmother's favorite Alabama fan.
Well, I appreciate that. I know there was a lot of Alabama fans.
Freaking Tide. Okay. So anyway, it's great to be on with you guys, and I'm very, very excited about all this. I really am.
Well, let's tell you what's going on. If you're listening to the show here, you obviously understand the format. We go long form on one particular topic, and we empower you, the listener, to kind of pick what that topic is every single week as we stroll down memory lane from the golden era of the WWF into the Attitude Era, and then even the more modern era, ruthless aggression, everything in between. From Bruce's tenure there from 1987 to 2008. But what if you liked your wrestling a little more Southern? What if you leaned a little more towards the Mid-Atlantic era? What if you liked maybe some things WCW or Jim Crockett Promotions? Well, Tony Schiavone and I are going to put together something I think you're going to really dig. We call it What Happened When Mondays. And this is going to be every single Monday right here on the MLW Radio Network. And What Happened When is going to delve deep on all those Jim Crockett Promotion stories and World Championship Wrestling stories. And we're here to announce the debut of the show is this coming Monday. And Tony, what's our first topic this week?
Well, our first topic is going to be kind of timely. It's going to be Goldberg. We'll talk about his impact on WCW, his legacy, and where we go from here. But it's obviously a hot topic with a lot of wrestling fans from, I guess, from the mid-'90s or the late '90s on and through right now, I guess.
Absolutely.
Hey, Tony, have you ever been cross-examined in a courtroom before by a dickhead prosecutor?
I was in a deposition by a dickhead prosecutor one time.
That's nothing compared to what Conrad's going to put you through.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
You will actually find common ground with me. we will have empathy for one another. It's it's back when you were married and I was single and I couldn't find that common ground. Well, now, we're both married, both got kids, and we're both being cross-examined on a weekly basis by the Conradison host, Mr. Thompson there.
I was looking forward to this. Now I'm not so freaking sure.
Yeah, give it a few weeks.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure we're going to have a great time. We'd love to have you join us. Follow Tony on Twitter. He is at Tony Schiavone 24. Of course, I am at Hey, it's Conrad. Our show account is at WHW Monday. So go find this in iTunes. It's going to be this Monday, the Monday after the Royal Rumble, the same Royal Rumble where you saw Brock Lesnar compete. You're going to be able to go ahead and listen to Tony and I talk about all things Goldberg from his debut in September of 97 all the way to Starrcade 98 when the decision was made to finally beat Goldberg and end the undefeated streak. It's a time in wrestling. We may never see anything like this ever again. And we're going to talk for long form, 2-3 hours, as long as it takes to really cover this in great detail. And we'd love to have you a part of it. So hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends about it. It's What Happened When Monday right here on MLW every single Monday. And as always, follow us on Twitter. We're going to do a poll again, and you'll be able to vote on next week's topics. All you've got to do is find us on Twitter at WHW Monday. Anything else you'd like to say, Tony, before we kick your ass off the WWF show for good?
No, I just like to say, Bruce, Conrad, congratulations on your show. I'd heard really with a lot of people that I know heard so much about it, what's going on. I just hope to be able to follow in your footsteps and keep everything alive, WCW. And I'd just like to say in closing, Conrad, anything Bruce tells you about me and him in Las Vegas is a freaking lie.
Pictures exist, Pally.
Oh my God. All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. So don't miss it. It's every single Monday right here on MLW Radio. What Happened When Monday. Follow us on Twitter at WHW Monday. Okay, Bruce, now that we've got Tony Schiavone out of the way, let's get to the matter at hand. Let's talk about our big news this week. Our live show sold out. We want to thank everybody for their support. If you're still looking for tickets, we're sorry. We're completely out. But given the success of this and that we had a sellout for an April 1st show on January 24th, we're probably going to look at doing this in the future. Is that fair to say, Bruce?
It sure is. Look around New York City, Summerslam weekend, Houston, Survivor Series weekend, and then Philly in about a year for the Royal Rumble next year. But if you can't get to see us at the live show, April 1st, you can certainly come by and see me at WrestleCon on Friday, March 31st and Saturday, April 1st at the Damage 365 booth at WrestleCon. And also I would suggest, you're still looking for a show to go to, Jim Ross's live show is taking place on Sunday, and you never know who the hell is going to show up there.
Well, you know. Let's talk about last week's episode and put a bow on Royal Rumble 94. Before we get to the main event, we had lots of follow-up. I kind of want to run through some of these pretty fast. Lots of questions about why did the announcers change from DiBiase and Vince McMahon to JR and Gorilla for the Razor Ramon IRS match?
Simply to give JR and Gorilla some time on the pay-per-view. They were the challenge announced team, and just to change it up a little bit.
The finish of the match with Brett and Lex Luger, who really hit first? I got this 1,000 times.
Well, we actually did say it on the show last week. They both hit at exactly the same time, and I put all of that on Bret Hart. Bret Hart was perfect in his execution, controlling Lex and himself going over. They hit at the same time.
How could he do that? How could he be so sure?
Well, because Bret had control of Lex's legs, and he positioned his legs and feet when they went over the top, so that Brett made sure that they were both flat-footed and that they both hit at the same time.
No kayfabe explanation was given why the babyface locker room didn't clear out to help the Undertaker as the heels took advantage of him.
God damn, he's the Undertaker, pal. He doesn't need anybody. He has no friends. Why would they save him? That's the explanation.
Do you think the finish hurt the Undertaker?
Absolutely not.
Do you really think it was a good match?
Yes, I do.
Taker actually first opened the urn at Tuesday in Texas, and it was ashes. We said last week we thought that was the first time. It was the first time that the smoke effect happened, but we did get that wrong. It was opened at Tuesday in Texas. Justin Roberts followed up with me on Twitter to say that the magic guy who we referenced with that green smoke, Richie, he was the person who played the usher in the old Gold Dust skits with Marlena. I didn't realize that. What else did you guys have Richie do?
Well, not only that, Richie was a genius behind a lot of the magic that took place behind the scenes. But if you remember the gentleman who was the ass buffer for Mr. McMahon, that also was Richie. So
there you go. Before we get into what happened when Kurt Angle made his WWE debut, we ought to celebrate the Chinese New Year, which is tomorrow. And you're in luck, Bruce. It is the year of the rooster. Okay, before we have a whole bunch of commercials and then other shit you don't want to hear, go ahead and plug all your friends.
Easy now. I want to give it. These are our fans. Okay, these are our listeners. Got to give a shout out to Carl O'Reilly in Ireland, who's recovering from some heart issues, who says that the only thing that got him through his time in the hospital was listening to you and I. Now, I could see us putting someone in the hospital, but getting him through, who knows? And special thanks to some T-shirt buyers, Jeremy Garcia in San Antonio Spurs front office. You'll probably see him this weekend. Stuart Clark with the Escondido Golf and Lake Club, who missed my call when I called him for buying a T-shirt. So he went and bought another T-shirt 5 minutes later, and I had a nice chat with him. Our friends over at Florida State University, Alan Acosta, and the Students Affair Clique, Scott and Jill Hay in Houston. And I even had a couple of orders from some folks in Connecticut, but I'm not going to mention their names because, well, we got to protect the innocent.
But we are going to mention the names of our good friends
over at rgt4law.com.
Did you know there are billions of dollars set aside for asbestos victims and their families? If you or a loved one has been affected by mesothelioma or an asbestos-related cancer, you can call 855-748-4529 for a free consultation. That's 855-748-4529. Or visit rgtforlaw.com for more information. Robert Taylor, R.G. Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, Bruce, it's time to get into our main event. It won the poll in a runaway this week. It's true. It's damn true. Kurt Angle is going into the WWE Hall of Fame, and we're going to talk about what happened when Kurt Angle became a professional wrestler. Bruce, you were there at the very beginning, and of course, we all know the backstory of Kurt Angle, and we're going to do this show just a little different. We're not going to go into as much detail about his entire life story as we may have in some of our previous biographies, simply because Kurt's story isn't done yet. Kurt hasn't officially retired. Kurt spent actually longer in TNA than he did in the WWE. There's just so much to cover, and we're going to go explore Kurt Angle's career in great detail for years to come here on this show as we break down some of his major matches. But what we do want to do today is give some insight into some things that you may not know. The fun little details that Bruce was there for that a lot of folks wouldn't have been there for. And, of course, we're going to talk about all the fun and interesting stuff that happened along the way. But I guess we should start at the beginning. And we all know that Kurt was a stud in college, and then he was in the Olympics and won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck. So I'm curious, when would he have first been a conversation in the office? Because you often hear, especially during the Olympic season, when America has a great run, whether it's male or female this year, or this past year rather, hey, Vince might want this guy. This person may have a future in the WWE, et cetera, et cetera. When do you first remember Kurt Angle's name coming up in a meeting?
I don't remember Kurt Angle's name coming up in a meeting till after the Olympics when he won the gold medal, and there was a little bit of interest there. How about grabbing the first? He was American that became our first gold medalist that was right age, right size, right temperament and everything. Let's talk to this guy.
It's interesting to me in doing some research here that Kurt didn't just want to go straight into wrestling. I do remember seeing interviews with him where he kind of dismissed the idea of becoming a professional wrestler. He just kind of laughed it off. But one of the things he didn't laugh off, and this was fascinating to me, was a tryout with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kurt grew up in Pittsburgh, or right outside of Pittsburgh. So he was kind of the hometown boy, and the Steelers had a little interest in him when they realized, hey, he doesn't have an immediate plan. He could be a big ticket seller for us. This could be a good idea. So Kurt tries out for the Steelers as a fullback, and this happens in 1993, even before the Olympics. So the Steelers actually tried to put him on a practice squad, but Kurt had other ideas and just went back into wrestling. Do you remember hearing about this Steelers story at all?
No, I never heard about Kurt having any desire to play football and or the greatest NFL team in the history of the NFL having any interest in him either.
Well, I'm going to debate that whole greatest line, but I do find it fascinating that his career runs so many parallels with Brock Lesnar. You know, they both had huge success in collegiate wrestling. They both became giant WWE stars. They both tried their hand with their local football teams. Of course, we all remember Brock Lesnar trying out for the Vikings. He grew up in Minnesota. And then Kurt Angle trying out for the Steelers. He grew up in Pittsburgh. But they even both flirted with the idea of doing MMA. Of course, we know that Brock pursued it. But it's just interesting to me that their career runs so parallel. And I'm sure we'll talk about that famous story here in just a little bit. It's also worth mentioning that Kurt was heavily involved with the crew of guys who you can read about and watch in the movie Foxcatcher. And if you haven't watched this movie or any of the documentaries, I think Bruce and I would recommend this highly. Bruce, you'd recommend Foxcatcher, right?
Definitely. I like the documentaries much more than the theatrical movie that had Steve Carell in it, but it is a fascinating, true story. And I remember when it came out, when the story came out and happened, and they were talking about David Schultz, and people would call and say, oh, my God, Dr. D, David Schultz was killed. Different David Schultz.
Right.
And David and Mark Schultz were two great Olympians that were there at Foxcatcher, and it is a fascinating story. Check it all out. It is worth your time.
So the kind of Cliff Notes version here, John DuPont, who was from the DuPont family empire, a very wealthy family, created a wrestling camp right there on his land, and he called it Foxcatcher. He allowed guys to come there and train. He actually put them on payroll to train. It was revolutionary, and it really was a shot in the arm for the Olympics, for at least the American side. Well, it didn't end well. DuPont shot and killed Dave Schultz, and Kurt Angle was supposed to be at this camp. So it's a fascinating story. Foxcatcher, go check it out. It's interesting to think about what might have been. Of course, in the Olympics, we know he broke his freaking neck, and when he finishes up with the Olympics, he's trying to figure out where's he going to go now. What's the best option? And if I was Kurt, I would probably go land myself an agent. When you guys first met with Vince and Kurt, was there an agent involved?
Yeah, Dave Hawk, who is still Kurt's agent. So that says something about Kurt and Dave that are best friends growing up. And Dave is the guy that has helped manage Kurt's career and has been his agent since day one.
It's interesting to me that he kind of backs up on his initial stance of not wanting to be involved with professional wrestling. So that to me lends itself to a good story. The first meeting with Vince, are you in the room? How does this go?
I met Kurt when he came in, and first he met with Vince. They all went in and met with Vince alone. Afterwards, Vince sent him into my office to talk to him a little bit more about the business and get a feel for what Kurt's desires were, what he was really looking for, what he knew about the business, and what have you. And in that meeting, there was a comment made by Kurt that I kind of just ended the meeting, because Kurt made it very clear that being an Olympic gold medalist, that he couldn't possibly ever lose a match. He's the best there is, and no one could ever beat him. No one would ever believe that he could lose a match. So I thanked Kurt for his time, and I wished him very well with his gold medal, and moved on next.
So I'm curious, when you have this meeting and he says he can't lose, who all's in the room for that?
For that one, that was just me, Kurt, and Dave.
So does he meet with Vince after, or did you just shoo him away?
No, he met with Vince prior to the meeting with me, and then we wanted to talk about where his head was and just tell him a little bit about the business. I don't think that Kurt was really serious at that time about coming in and being a professional wrestler. In Kurt's head, and maybe in his agent's head, they thought that he should just come in and be world champion because he's a gold medalist.
Did he, do you remember you guys having a specific money discussion at that point? Did he have an
I didn't.
Okay.
No.
Who would have wanted him the most? In my head, this seems like something JR would have been giddy about.
Sure. We all wanted him. We all loved the prospect of having the first Olympic gold medalist on the roster. That would have been a cool deal. But we only wanted him if he wanted to be there. And the old school in me was, I wanted guys that wanted to be in the business. I wanted guys who loved it and who would be in the business if they were still making $15 a night. And I know that sounds crazy, but that was just the way I was at the time. More old school. And Kurt was definitely of the new school. And he was an Olympic gold medalist and great honor, but he didn't feel that he needed to lose if he came into the WWF.
Let's talk about when this is. Do you have a frame of reference for the time period? What month or year?
God, I don't know the month, but it would have been 1997 sometime. So obviously it was after the Olympics, but it was a little while after the Olympics. It's 6 months to a year after he had won the gold medal.
And when this doesn't happen, he winds up in the ECW arena with Shane Douglas. Of course, they know each other from Pittsburgh. They have that in common. So upon that invitation, he works out an appearance at the ECW arena with Paul Heyman. He is in the crow's nest doing commentary when they do maybe the most controversial angle in the history of the ECW arena. Raven crucifies Sandman and puts a thorn of barbed wires on his head, or a crown of barbed wires on his head. Do you recall this silly angle and hearing about it and the uproar?
I recall hearing about it. I knew nothing of it, sir. I had no idea that they were going to do something like that. I apologize to you, sir.
Yeah, so Angle's pretty pissed off at this and demands that he not be associated with it, don't show my face, and if that happens, I'm going to sue. And it looks like wrestling is maybe done for him. So he becomes a local sportscaster there in Pittsburgh and then starts endorsing pizza. Bruce, can you imagine how different not just Kurt's life would be, but the WWE would be had he stuck with being a sportscaster and pizza pitch man?
Well, I dare say that he was not the best sportscaster in the world, and the pizza, not the healthiest alternative for him as well.
But the healthiest alternative we know of is blueapron.com/wrestling. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals for free, and you get free shipping. Just go to blueapron.com/wrestling, and you're going to love how good it feels and tastes to create these incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. Go to blueapron.com/wrestling. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. So now when we're talking about this first deal with the WWF, because there is a second meeting, and I've always been fascinated with this when it doesn't go well and then there is a follow-up meeting. It feels like somebody has to kind of tuck their tail here. So I'm curious, who calls who? Does the WWF reach out to Kurt or vice versa?
I want to say Kurt reached out to the WWF at this point.
And how does that look? Are you involved in this process, or does he just call JR, or kind of talk us through that?
I believe that JR reached, kind of extended the olive branch a little bit after Kurt had not been setting the world on fire with his sportscasting and pizza sales. So, hey, kid, you're still interested. We can come back and talk. Come back to the table. Maybe losing ain't so bad. And they came back, and Vince, JR, spoke with him, and Kurt's attitude had changed quite a bit.
Does this meeting happen in Stamford, or is it in Pittsburgh? Are y'all meeting while you're on the road, or?
No, they all took place in Stamford at the headquarters, Titan Tower.
In a meeting like this, I'm curious, does this happen in Vince's personal office, his little conference room, or like the giant one that we've seen a lot of pictures of online?
No, they either happen in Vince's office or JR's office. The first time he came in, he met in Vince's office and then came down to my office. And this time, I believe they all just met in Vince's office.
So October of 1998, he finally signs, and he signs an 8-year deal. And I've been fascinated by this. An 8-year deal for a rookie seems like a big commitment. Was that common to sign a new talent at that time to an 8-year deal?
No, and this was more of a developmental deal. As JR and I were posed with talent relations, we also were posed with the very real problem of where in the hell is talent going to come from in the future. So we had to create our own talent, and Kurt was a great first candidate for that because he had the pedigree, he had the gold medal. So bring Kurt in to the developmental territory that we had, train him, and hopefully create our own star in Kurt Angle.
So I'm curious about this. The 8-year term is a WWE call, not a Kurt Angle call. So it's not
that was our call.
What type of money guarantee does he get relative to an upstart? Obviously, he's going to get more money than a traditional rookie. I mean, I'm just freestyling a guess here, but if you guys would have signed Reckless Youth at the time instead of Kurt Angle, he's not getting an 8-year deal, and he's not getting the money guarantee. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, and I think we did sign Reckless Youth about that time.
Well, I'm just guessing that he didn't make as much money as Kurt Angle, and he didn't have an 8-year deal.
He also didn't have a gold medal.
That's what I mean. I'm not disparaging Reckless Youth. I'm just saying you guys felt like, and maybe Kurt felt like, there's an agent involved. He has some name value. He has some mainstream accomplishments. That has real value to the WWF.
Yes, it did. And, it's funny because we always took the approach. It was usually a negative if talent had a manager attached to it because the offer was going to be the same.
Right.
And we dealt with the talent one-on-one. There weren't agents in the locker room negotiating finishes and negotiating creative. It's a different world. The offer was going to be the same. The only difference is if you have an agent and you want them to negotiate it, then you're going to have to pay them that 10% or whatever deal it is that you have with your agent. So we always discourage that, but Kurt had one, it was done, and the idea behind it was we wanted to train the first Olympic gold medalist in Kurt Angle, and create our own star that we could have for a long time. We didn't want to train him, spend 3 years training him, put him on let's call it a 3 or 4 year deal. The first few years of that is training, and that's what it was. The first couple of years with Kurt, we got him in the ring. We sent him to Power Pro Wrestling in Memphis. But there was time that we had to teach him the business. So that was an investment. He was a big investment, and an investment that paid off greatly.
I know you're not going to tell me, but I got to at least ask. Does he sign for Brock Lesnar $250,000 a year guarantee, or at this time are the economics just a lot different? Because in October of '98, the financial state of the WWE is greatly different than when Brock Lesnar would sign, not too terribly long after. So would this be $100,000, $250,000, just higher, lower? Make some sort of comparison.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to comment on that because I don't comment on money. But Brock Lesnar was not signed initially for $250,000 a year to go train either.
That's the narrative that's out there for a lot of folks.
Well, I'm sure it is, but that is not accurate.
Would Kurt have gotten one of the largest developmental deals ever?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because the developmental deals weren't big money contracts. They were simply to pay you while you train and while you learn.
He starts training with Dory Funk, and this is obviously well before NXT or OVW or any of that. Is this training with Dory happening at the Trax facility that you guys had at the time?
No, we didn't have Trax facility at the time. We had a ring in the studio warehouse, and Kurt actually started training with my brother, Tom Prichard. And he came in, and the amazing thing about Kurt Angle is amateur wrestlers spend their entire lives doing one thing, and that is staying off of their back. So it's very unnatural for an amateur wrestler to be able to take a flat back bump, to attack the mat, and take bumps the way that wrestlers do. Kurt Angle, 15, 20 minutes, he was attacking the mat and taking flat back bumps better than a lot of pros I've seen. He just is a cyborg when it comes to working out. And he owned it. I mean, you looked at him and said, damn it, he's got it. And my brother Tom was training with him at every level. He would go in and they would train in the morning in the ring. Then they would go and they would work out in the gym on more cardio, more weight training, resistance training. Then Kurt wanted to go back into the ring. Now, Tom was in shape, and Tom was a great trainer and loved to work out. But this was a different level. This was world-class Kurt Angle training, and Tom would be worn out, beat up every single day after spending roughly 8 hours in the ring with Kurt Angle, beating him up, with Tom trying to train him professional wrestling and making that work for him. But then Dory came in, and Dory, we had what we called the Funkin' Dojo, where Dory would come in for a couple weeks, and we would bring talent from around the world in to evaluate and see if there was something there.
And around this time, you guys were trying out all kinds of folks. Carino, Teddy Hart. We'll talk about some of those other guys in great detail and what some of these camps may look like in the future. Let's move on briefly, though, because Kurt would do some developmental, and you mentioned it a minute ago, for Power Pro in Memphis. And again, this kind of predates OVW. So this was like one of the original developmental territories for the WWF. And another superstar would go through that same Power Pro promotion and actually win his first belt there. A kid by the name of Flex Kavana, who we now know as The Rock. So how did this Memphis relationship come together? Would this have been something that Jerry puts together? Or the other Jerry?
No, this was something JR and I put together.
It's in Memphis. It's natural for me to assume there's a Jerry involved.
Well, there was a Jerry involved, and that was Jerry Lawler. The Memphis Power Pro arrangement was one of, once we had talent that we trained, we needed a place for them to be able to wrestle every night and work in front of a live crowd to get that feedback and get that feeling in front of a live crowd. So Memphis was perfect. They did TV. They did live TV every week. So they get that experience going out and doing live TV, and they also get the experience of being on the road a little bit and wrestling in front of a live audience every night. It was a great setup. It's something that JR and I had done early on, and we sent a lot of guys there. As you said, Flex Cavana, who later became The Rock, Kurt Angle, who later became Kurt Angle, Rikishi was sent there, Prince Albert. There were quite a few that went through the Memphis and OVW training facility.
Well, it didn't take long for Kurt to make his first appearance on WWF TV. So let's recap. He signs in October of 98. Fast forward, it's March 7th, 1999, and on an episode of Sunday Night Heat, he was shown sitting in the crowd. Tiger Ali Singh, who I can't wait to talk about one day, called Kurt into the ring and offered to pay Kurt to blow his nose on the American flag. Of course, Kurt instead blows his nose on Singh's flag and suplexes him a few times. As a side note, our favorite, Cock-a-Doodle-Doo Man himself, was on commentary for this. Any memories of this angle? Kurt got a huge babyface reaction for this.
He did, because Tiger Ali Singh was a traditional foreign heel. And Kurt playing the American babyface, goddamn hero. Yeah, he got a huge reaction, but it was not exactly where we were going with Kurt. When Kurt first started in the Funkin' Dojo, as we talked about earlier, Kurt did a promo where he was just white bread, milk toast, babyface, old 1960s babyface. And when he finished the promo, I got up and I told the entire class that was one of the greatest heel promos I'd ever heard, because times were changing and the audience was regurgitating those types of baby faces and those types of, by golly gee whiz, I'm Kurt Angle. I like milk and I like apple pie. Yuck. So Dory Funk Jr., I remember getting very upset with me because he thought that it was babyface all the way. And I just explained the audience will throw him up. And it was something that Kurt believed, and it's something that Kurt was. Kurt was so good that after you get around him a little bit, you hated his guts, because everything came easy to him. He could do it all and did it with very little effort. It appeared very little effort. Kurt put a great deal of effort into everything he did, which is why it was so good.
The other thing that's so good that I think everybody needs to know about is the excellent night of sleep they're going to get on their brand new Casper mattress. Here's what you need to know about Casper, man. These mattresses have been obsessively engineered, and now they're at a shockingly fair price. It's going to combine supportive memory foam to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right sink and just the right bounce, with over 20,000 reviews and an average of 4.8 stars.
Well, you know what? If this mattress was in the Tokyo Dome in Japan, it'd be 6 stars if Dave Meltzer had anything to do with it.
Well, Americans agree. Whether you're on Casper, you're on Amazon, or you're on Google, 4.8 stars. This is the internet's favorite mattress. And it's going to be yours too. But check this out. Here's what I like. I like a good deal. You get free shipping and returns to the United States and Canada. But maybe best of all, you get to try your Casper for 100 nights risk-free in your home. If you don't love it, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. That includes shipping. Man, they're shipping a mattress to you for free. This thing has been designed, developed, and assembled right here in the USA, just like our Olympic hero, Kurt Angle. It's true. It's damn true. You can get a special offer, all because you listen to Something to Wrestle With. You can get $50 off any mattress purchase. Just visit Casper.com/.
Bruce. That's right. That's my name. Just go to Casper.com/Bruce to get $50 towards any mattress purchase.
Terms and conditions may apply, but check it out right now. Casper.com/Bruce. So Bruce, talking a little bit more about his first match. It happens on April 11th, 1999. So just a couple of weeks after this in-ring thing on Sunday Night Heat. And he works a dark match against Brian Christopher. And Kurt has said since that during that match, he felt like Brian was taking liberties with him. For instance, telling him he was going to suplex him, but giving him a DDT instead. And then Kurt lands on top of his head. So Kurt was waiting for him backstage and ready to tear him apart. But according to rumor and innuendo, Al Snow talks him off the ledge here. Do you remember this incident in particular?
I don't remember any incident backstage, and Brian Christopher may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I don't think he would be crazy enough to try and shoot with an Olympic gold medalist. So this might have been something that got folklore blown up out of proportion as years went on. Kurt had also been around the horn and been doing dark matches, television matches, live event matches with an opponent, Dr. X, all around the cards for quite a while before he made this first television debut, because we didn't want everybody to see him yet. And Dr. X, of course, was Tom Prichard, who went out and worked with Kurt and got great matches out of him every single night.
And let's talk about these promos. This is what everybody wants to talk about, the vignette treatment that we have really talked about in great detail in the past, whether it was for Mr. Perfect or the $1 Million Man. Well, you guys do it here, and you do it for Kurt Angle. And this is exactly what you talked about. They're so sugary, sweet, syrupy, white meat baby face that it kind of turns him a heel a little bit. And this is where he introduces the 3 eyes. Can you kind of talk us through whose idea that was? Did you shoot and produce these?
I did not. These were something that was done in the studio, and Vince had a heavy hand in. And I believe that Vince McMahon came up with the 3 eyes. I'm not really sure. But the idea behind it was to present Kurt as who he was. But his delivery was a little demeaning. I'm an Olympic gold medalist. I'm the only real athlete in the WWF. Emphasis on that word real, therefore implying that every other athlete in the WWF was less than real. So it got the ire of quite a few people in the back, like, what, is he talking to me? What the hell? I'm a real athlete. I'm a real wrestler. So it was kind of funny because it raised eyebrows, but it got the right reaction, not just from the talent backstage, but from the audience, who viewed Kurt as very condescending and arrogant.
It caught fire. I mean, there's no other way to say it. People were ready for this, and he makes his debut actually at a pay-per-view at Survivor Series 1999. He defeats Shawn Stasiak. And Kurt says during the match, the referee told him, Vince wants you to beat him up. So go get the mic and tell the crowd, don't chant boring at an Olympic gold medalist. So we've never really talked about this, but how often would Vince call an audible in the middle of a match and give instructions like this to the ref, who would then pass it to the wrestlers, and they would just alter the original plan completely?
If it needed to happen, I mean, he'll do it. So it happens more often than you think. Or Vince will be back watching something and say, tell him to do this, tell him to try that.
No. What might it sound like when Vince is giving these instructions?
God damn it, pal. Eat him up. Beat the shit out of him. God damn it. Tell him to get Stasiak on the ground. Tell him you don't boo an Olympic gold medalist. I'm not boring. I'm a real athlete.
Let's talk about that, because we've referenced it a few times.
God damn it, we didn't talk about it, Conrad.
He positions himself as the only real athlete. Was there any heat amongst the boys for that? I mean, I know it's all just, storyline or whatever, but feels like some of the guys may have taken issue with it, because this is 1998 and he's saying, I'm real.
Sure. I mean, Steve Austin, for one, looking at him like, oh, God damn, is this guy saying I ain't real? So, sure, everybody was, even Undertaker felt it was demeaning and didn't like the tone of the vignettes. Like, come on, guys, it's work. But if you can get the talent upset about it and you can get the talent feeling that, then you've got the audience.
Well, he had the audience for sure, and he starts a little bit of an undefeated streak here, including a trip to his hometown of Pittsburgh, where he's booed, so it's working, getting him over as a heel here. And this undefeated streak comes to an end, though, at the Royal Rumble 2000. He has a mystery opponent for this, and it's a big debut for our fellow podcaster, Taz, who is making his WWF debut that night. Taz, as you may recall, is coming off a world title run with ECW, where he really made a name for himself and became a big deal in the business. And now here he is facing Kurt Angle. There's lots of tweets about this. I can't believe anybody thinks this is a real thing, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Was Kurt concerned that Taz may try to shoot on him?
No. Taz was concerned that Kurt might shoot on him.
Well, I just don't. That all of that conversation in a first match, like I know that Taz comes in as with a reputation, but Kurt is an Olympic gold medalist. That's another level. You don't have to worry about that guy,
right? And Taz always has been a professional.
Absolutely.
There was no real fear. Oh my God, Taz is going to shoot on him. There was no fear of that, because if Taz did try to shoot on him, Kurt would have been able to handle himself just fine. And I don't believe that there was any fear that Kurt was going to shoot on Taz or anybody else. It's just the kind of rumor and innuendo that people like to stir up and talk about. Oh, what if they shot on each other? What if one guy got mad? They're professionals. They're both professionals and know their job and understand that what they're doing is to entertain. If they still wanted to be shooting, they could still be out on those hard mats on a gym floor somewhere shooting.
So Kurt wins the European title from Val Venus on February 17th. And just 17 days later, he wins the Intercontinental title from Chris Jericho at No Way Out. So this is kind of interesting to me. So quickly into his run, debuting in November, and now here we are in February, and he's got both the European and the Intercontinental titles. Whose idea was it to make him a dual champion? Because this is the first time this has happened with these two belts like this.
I don't recall whose idea it was, but the thinking behind it was Kurt was the first Olympic gold medalist. He would be the first man to hold individual singles championships at the same time. I don't think we'd ever done that before. We'd had guys who were a single champion and a tag team champion, but I don't think that we'd ever had one person hold multiple singles championships. And the European title was relatively new, and trying something new with Kurt Angle. Let him be the first. He was the first gold medalist. Now he'll be the first dual title holder.
He takes both of these belts into WrestleMania 2000, which for our purposes we'll call 16. And here, this is kind of an interesting deal. He's in a three-way match with Jericho and Benoit, and both titles are on the line at the same time in a 2 out of 3 falls match. So the first fall is for the Intercontinental title, and Benoit pins Jericho. So Benoit is now the Intercontinental champion. The second fall, Jericho pins Benoit to win the European title. So if you're keeping score at home, kids, Kurt lost both titles without being pinned either time. And obviously this was done to find a way to keep looking as strong as possible. But I'm curious, why was the decision made to get both of the belts off of him here? Is this to warm him up for the world title, or what's the thinking?
Essentially, yes. And they felt that time to move on with Kurt, and let's maybe see if he can carry the WWF title. So it was a way to wean him off and then bring him back along into the WWF title picture.
The next month, he moves on to Backlash, and Kurt loses to the Big Show, who had recently debuted in February of that year. The following month, he's at Judgment Day, and Kurt's in a 6-man tag with Edge and Christian, and they lose to Too Cool and Rikishi. It's just fascinating to me that, you know, we have this big undefeated streak, then we win both titles, and now we start losing to Big Show and Too Cool. The following month at King of the Ring, Kurt is back on track, and he becomes the King of the Ring, defeating Jericho and Rikishi to win the tournament. You've told us before, I think, that Vince was really high on the King of the Ring concept. Would this have been a long-term plan? When do you think you guys would have selected Kurt Angle to be the King of the Ring? Is this something that happens months prior, weeks prior, or by this point, just days prior?
No, usually you're thinking about that after WrestleMania because it, at the time, was the next major pay-per-view. So you're thinking, okay, our next big one is going to be King of the Ring. Who are we looking at to get the rub on King of the Ring? Because King of the Ring was viewed as a launching pad to move into the next championship run.
Well, he moved into a big-time program with The Undertaker, because anytime you're working with The Undertaker, it's main event. And this leads to a fully loaded pay-per-view match that July. Undertaker wins the bout, and this is when he's doing his American Badass gimmick. Earlier, you kind of indicated that maybe Undertaker wasn't so high on working with him. Is that based strictly on the real comment, or is that based on other parameters?
Really, it was based on Kurt's style, and Taker didn't know if he could work that style and have a good, believable match, and felt Kurt was a little too small at the time. But when they got into the ring and they had their match, Taker came back ecstatic, knowing that he could draw money with Kurt Angle, and immediately wanted to do more. So it was just a reluctance. It's that fear of the unknown. They'd never been in the ring together, not exactly sure what they could do with one another. And Taker's style was a little bit slower paced, even though he was doing the American Badass gimmick and was getting out of that. Kurt just meshed. They meshed and got along well and had some of the greatest matches ever.
Kurt then begins a storyline where he starts to form a relationship with Stephanie McMahon, who at this point, at least in storyline, is married to Triple H. And this leads to the inevitable Angle Triple H feud. And you guys were really teasing an affair between the two, even going so far as having Kurt and Stephanie kiss after a tag match they had with The Rock and Lita. And it's implied that they even slept together in a hotel, but she didn't remember because they explained she had a concussion. I've always been fascinated by this, and I'm just going to freestyle a guess here. Stephanie McMahon during this time was in a lot of romantic storylines. Did Vince have some sort of weird fetish for involving his daughter in storylines like this, where she's kissing the boys or romantically linked with the boys?
God damn, pal, what are you trying to say?
Just what I said.
Oh, in that case. Yeah, probably so.
What?
No, the dynamic, the love dynamic, relationship dynamic, we try to write storylines that everyone can identify with. And females in particular, well, not just females in particular. That was awful damn sexist. I think people in particular can relate to relationships, good and or bad. But men and women have intimate relationships.
Really? And I didn't realize.
If you can, yeah. And if you can tell that story on the air, well, sometimes when you have people writing storylines that have never had one, it's shocking. But those were the stories that resonated the most with the audience. And Stephanie McMahon was good at it. and people could relate more to it. So she was thrown into a lot of those.
Did Vince direct them?
A lot of times, yes.
What would that sound like?
God damn, pal. Get in there like you mean it. That's right. Kiss my daughter. Kiss her. Kiss her like you mean it. Ah, yeah. Come here. Let me show you how to do it.
Oh, gosh.
That never happened. Just kidding, folks. Just kidding.
Let me go ahead and
grab some of that. Ah. No, that didn't happen. But Vince did direct a lot of it, yes.
Okay. Let's go to SummerSlam 2000. Kurt is in the main event, challenging for the world title. It's in a triple threat, and he's here with the big players, Triple H and The Rock. Not too long into the match, Triple H tries to pedigree Kurt through the announcer's table, but the table breaks, and Kurt takes a nasty fall head first through the table onto the floor. And Kurt was out for a little bit of this, or it seemed like he was unconscious, and then eventually returns towards the end of the match. Of course, we remember The Rock wins, and Kurt says after that he did suffer what he considered to be a bad concussion and suffered with these symptoms for quite a while afterwards. What was the backstage reaction when this happens? And obviously we know a lot more about head trauma and CTE in 2017 than we did back then. Why was Kurt allowed to continue the match?
Unfortunately, we didn't have concussion protocol at that time, but Kurt was brought back, and Kurt was completely coherent. He was talking to us. He said that he thought he got knocked out, but he didn't have any problem remembering, didn't have any problem speaking. He was in it. He knew the finish of the match. He knew everything that needed to happen, and said he was fine to go back out. I think in hindsight, after the fact, you realize, no, he really wasn't. And the concussions did a lot more than anybody really knew at the time. So all you can do is take the talent for their word at the time. And Kurt was coherent, saying that he was good to go back. So we let him go back.
They kind of go ahead and finish up the Triple H Kurt Angle issue at Unforgiven the next month, and that kind of puts a bow on all things Kurt and Stephanie. It seems like this was cut short. Do you know what problems Triple H had with Kurt at the time?
I don't know that Triple H had any problems with Kurt at the time. I don't think that Kurt and Triple H had a lot of chemistry in the ring at that time, but I don't know that there were necessarily any problems per se.
So the next month at No Mercy, Kurt finds himself back in the main event picture, this time challenging The Rock for the WWF title, and Kurt wins the match to become the new WWF champion. And let's put that in perspective for you now, guys. This is his first year in the business, his first year in the WWE, and he's won the European title, the Intercontinental title, and I think he actually jokingly referred to one of these as the Eurocontinental title when he had them both.
Exactly.
He wins the King of the Ring. And obviously he's running around asking people, where are your gold medals? And now he's the WWF champion. And this happens all in the same year. So you guys were clearly very high on him for him to get such a gigantic push in his very first year, less than a year into the company.
It was organic. The audience was really taking to Kurt, and Kurt was keeping up. So you go with it. You're feeling it. The audience is buying it. Let's go with this guy. And it was just purely organic.
So I'm curious about The Rock here, because The Rock would be the guy who puts over Kurt for his first WWF title. What was The Rock like in this era?
He was a rock. He was on a meteoric rise, unlike anything that we had seen in quite some time. So he was on top of the world and just building everybody he touched.
This happens at No Mercy, and Rikishi is involved, and that starts to set up some things for him. And around this time, as we mentioned earlier, Kurt had started to align himself with Edge and Christian, and they called themselves Team ECK for Edge, Christian, and Kurt. They had a lot of, they first introduced, I guess, rather, comedy to Kurt Angle, where you got to see maybe a different side of Kurt. What were some of your favorite memories of shooting that? Whose idea was that? Any good memories of their vignettes and skits they did together?
Well, the idea behind it was from Brian Gewirtz. Brian Gewirtz was a big fan of Edge and Christian and Kurt. And I dare say, God damn it, we didn't do comedy. We did humor. We did entertainment. So it was just a way to get their personalities out and to get more personality, more of a fun-loving personality out of Kurt, and see some of that comedic timing that Kurt naturally had. And Kurt could do things with a straight face and then go out there and kick your ass where people could be entertained by him, but when he got in the ring, they believed everything that he did. I dare say that Kurt helped Edge and Christian with their credibility in the ring, even though both guys tremendous on their own, and Edge and Christian helped Kurt with some of his promos and his lightheartedness and his comedy, if you will. I'll say comedy.
But why did Vince have a hard-on for the word comedy?
We don't do comedy. We do humor. Same reason that what are some of the other things?
Title and belt.
Do? Yeah. Semantics. Pronouns, pal. God damn it.
Was there conversations ever that you remember ever having a conversation with Vince? There's this old adage in the business. Some buy into it, some don't. Funny, don't draw money.
I buy into that. Yeah.
So you believe that that's true, that you can't really draw money with humor.
If it's ha-ha humor and if that's the character and that's all you do, yeah, that's not going to draw money. There has to be something real that people can believe in as well. The humor and ha-ha has its place, and there's a time and a place for it. But when you're trying to draw money and sell tickets, it's got to be tempered. If you can back it up in the ring and you can offer a product that does both, then that's a good, perfect package. And Angle was able to offer both.
What about Vince, though? Did Vince subscribe to that philosophy?
He subscribed to the philosophy of being entertaining as long as when you got into the ring, you were able to do both. But if it was all ha-ha, he wasn't a big fan of all ha-ha.
It just feels like in this era, there starts to be a little more ha-ha. You know, obviously The Rock was doing funny promos at the time. Edge and Christian are doing some funny stuff here. Kurt's involved in it. It won't be long and we'll be talking about, Stone Cold singing and wearing funny hats. So there's lots of comedy and mixed in here. Would a lot of this come from a certain writer?
At the time, probably a lot of that would come from Brian Gewirtz.
Yeah.
Brian definitely was a big fan of comedy and doing things. And that's not to say Vince wasn't a fan of it, because he was. What I'm saying is their comedy stopped once the bell rang, for the most part. When the bell rang, they became serious, right, and it was different. As long as they could do that, what I think people confuse in the way that you asked the question was, did comedy draw? A just purely comedy guy all the time that you could never take seriously, I don't think that drew. I don't think that was a good formula. Somebody that entertained you in promos and someone that could put themselves in situations where they can laugh at themselves, but when they got into the ring, you believed it, that package drew.
I'm curious. We talked about it a minute ago. I want to circle back. Would Brian have had The Rock's ear even here?
Would Brian have had The Rock's ear here? Some people might argue, did Rock have Brian's ear? Yes. Brian Gewirt's one of the most talented writers that I ever had the pleasure of working with. And Rock did all of his stuff. Brian did all of his stuff for The Rock, and vice versa. They worked well together, and hell, they're still working together.
Well, I guess that's my question is when Rock, because you've heard lots of rumor and innuendo. Rock had his issues behind the scenes with Stone Cold. He had his issues behind the scenes with Triple H. And he puts over Kurt Angle for Kurt's first title win. Was there any protesting to that? Is he all for it? Was there any sort of issue? Or did somebody on the inside, maybe a Brian, get in his ear and say, hey, he's a good guy, and this is not going to be the long-term plan, and here's what we've got in store for you? Or who is kind of the person Rock would lean on for those type of conversations at the time? And do you remember any sort of discussion about him not wanting to put over Kurt?
Well, I never heard any discussion of Rock not wanting to put over Kurt. And at that time, Rock would probably lean on Vince, but he did have Brian to help out creatively that was pitching ideas for him constantly. But Rock would probably be speaking directly with Vince a lot during that time.
Let's talk about Survivor Series 2000. Kind of an interesting finish here. Kurt defeats The Undertaker. But at one point, Kurt runs under the ring, and Taker pulls someone out, gets him in the ring, hits the last ride powerbomb, goes for the pin, and then the ref realizes, hey, that's not Kurt. So then Kurt does a run in and rolls Taker up and pins him. Of course, the person that took the powerbomb is actually Kurt's brother, Eric. A pretty creative finish. Who thought of this?
It came from an idea back in Houston wrestling, by God, with the Twin Devils. They were a tag team, obviously twins, brothers who used to do the switch. And we saw Eric Angle backstage in Pittsburgh at one point. I confused Eric with Kurt because from afar they looked identical. Eric was a little bit thicker than Kurt. The idea just kind of happened, talking about the main event with the twin referees where the Hebners came out with the Hulk Andre match. And the idea was born. Hey, come here, take a look. Here's Eric and here's Kurt together. God, we got to be able to do something with this. And that idea was born.
It's a pretty interesting finish. I got to give you guys kudos for that one. Now we're going to go to Armageddon 2000. And I actually remember this. This was in Birmingham. I was at this show. Kurt defends the title in the first ever 6-man Hell in a Cell match. Inside this match, listen to this lineup. This is December of 2000. Kurt Angle, Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, The Undertaker, and Rikishi. And Kurt wins the match and retains the title. But this is... Oh, gosh. I really want to talk about this. We're just going to do it. As Rikishi was fighting off both Angle and The Undertaker pushes Rikishi off the cell into a bed of pine chips, which is on the bed of a truck, a flatbed that was used by McMahon.
Right. And, I mean, my God, doesn't every match have a flat bed with a bunch of crap in the back of it backed up to the ring during a match? I don't understand your question here, Conrad. What the hell are you getting at?
Well, this is in storyline. Vince McMahon and his stooges, Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe, are working together to try to demolish the cell with a truck. And that's the reason that the truck is there. But I'm just curious, like, is this just a time where people are like, well, if you're going to do a Hell in a Cell, somebody's got to come off of it. Who's it going to be and how are we going to do it?
I don't. That's kind of the feeling.
Oh, gosh.
Fuck, we got to sell. Who's taking the bump? Somebody got to take the bump off the sale. Got to sell. People want to see the bump. That was a cross between Jim Ross and Michael Hayes.
I was wondering, like, what just happened?
I morphed.
Oh my gosh!
I went from Pensacola, Atlanta to just straight Oklahoma there.
I should not. I apologize for coughing into the mic there. I had a sip of water right when you started doing that, and I was not ready.
It's a sad state of affairs. You set the bar. Mick Foley set the bar so damn high. Well, Shawn Michaels set the bar first, taking the bump off the Hell in a Cell. Then Mick Foley had to top that. Then it's like, well, we got to top that. And I hated those bumps. I hated it when Foley did it. Shawn's was a lot more controlled, but I wasn't crazy about it when Shawn did it either. And the reason being is I felt for the guy that was taking the bump, and I wanted them to be safe. Hence the truck and just the simple bump with Rikishi going out. But it was, hey, who's going to take the bump? We got to figure out a bump on this match because, we got it's hell. It's in a cell. Somebody got to get out of the cell, go to the top, take the bump.
Was there any concern about Rikishi walking around on top of this thing?
Yes, there sure was. That thing was reinforced to high heaven, especially taking into consideration Mick Foley and Undertaker up there and knowing how that was supposed to go and the way that the cell caved in once Mick hit it. There was a lot of concern, and it was double, triple, quadruple reinforced for Rikishi.
Whose idea is a truck with fucking pine chips?
I do not remember. I don't have a clue. I really don't have a clue. But it was a way to get something down there for him to land on safely. It was big enough. No margin of error.
Here's a silly question. Do you guys practice this bump at all?
Yes.
So do you practice it with the pine chips?
Goddamn right.
Okay.
It wasn't just pine chips. There was a crash pad in there.
Oh, yeah. Duh.
Well, there wasn't no crash pad on the tables and shit, but there was definitely one.
Well, depends on what WrestleMania we're talking about. Help me understand here. Does Rikishi is he just low man on the totem pole, so he's the guy who takes the bump? I just don't see The Undertaker or Steve Austin or The Rock or Triple H saying, oh, yeah, I'll jump off of there.
No, it was a way to get Rikishi off TV for a while. We needed him to go away for a little bit.
Well, then you definitely throw him off a cage into pine chips. I mean, that's what...
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I need my kid to go away for a while, I just take him to Chuck E. Cheese, throw him in the ball pit. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
You can go home now.
Kurt goes on to defend the WWF title the next month at the Royal Rumble against Triple H. Kurt wins the match after Austin hits Triple H with the Stone Cold Stunner. The next month at No Way Out, Kurt loses the title to The Rock. So the obvious plan here, so it would seem, because this is February, is to try to set up Austin and Rock on a collision course for WrestleMania 17. Was that always the plan? And when did you know that the plan was going to be Rock and Austin? So we've got to get the belt back on him here in February.
That was always the plan from day one. We knew where we were going at that Mania to get to Rock and Austin. So that goes back probably September, October the previous year.
So we just talked about the loss a minute ago that The Rock took to make Kurt the champ. That was at No Mercy. That's in October. So in February, the belt is coming off of him. Would you consider that at this time a successful run for Kurt's first world title run?
Sure.
I would agree. Kurt goes on to defeat Chris Benoit at WrestleMania 17, and this match seemed to be setting up an angle between the two because they would continue this feud through Backlash, where they would do a 30-minute ultimate submission match that Benoit would win 4-3, and they continue this through Judgment Day, where you see them working yet again. This time it's a 2 out of 3 falls match. The first fall's pinfalls. Benoit wins that one. Second fall submissions. Angle wins that one. And the third fall was the ladder match. And Edge and Christian help Angle get the W here. And here's something that a lot of people want us to talk about, I'm sure. The first time this happened, June 11th, it's on Raw. Kurt's wrestling Chris Benoit in a steel cage match. And this is where Kurt does the moonsault off the top of the cage. And I think this is the first time Kurt ever did this. Do you remember the bump and the discussion of the spot? Who tried to talk him out of it? Who was for it? And what was the reaction when it happened?
I remember Kurt doing moonsaults in Memphis when he was at Power Pro Wrestling early on in his career. Kurt just being a phenom, if you will, athletically. He could do it all. And Kurt wanted a spectacular bump, so he wanted to do the moonsault off of the top of the cage. I didn't like it. I tried to talk him out of it. As late as when he was doing it in TNA. It just was a dangerous bump, not just for Kurt, but for whoever the hell was laying on the mat in the ring taking the damn thing. So it's dangerous. Everyone's reaction, I dare say that may be where the oh shit chant came from, because people heard the talent in the back saying, oh shit, when Kurt landed that damn thing. It's impressive as hell. Kurt's an incredible athlete, and it looked great, but, oh, man, dangerous.
Explain to somebody who's not familiar with the mechanics of the way that works, when you hit, what hurts?
Everything. For the moment, it does. I mean, there's no way.
Knees, hips, everything.
Everything, man. Your knees are hitting, your elbows are hitting, your entire torso. Just the impact, and your cushion is another human being. So you're hitting bone on bone, muscle on muscle, just crashing to an abrupt conclusion, and it hurts like hell. There's nothing that doesn't hurt in a move like that. Just very, very painful.
Well, Kurt made it look easy, and he was able to do that because, he's a pro. And if you want something that's easy and makes you look like a pro this Valentine's Day, then you need to go to proflowers.com and get one of their already low prices right now. We're talking about a dozen assorted roses with a free glass vase for only $19.99 plus shipping and handling. Or upgrade. Maybe if you're big time in a little bit, go ahead and spend an extra $9.99. And now you can get 2 dozen assorted roses with that same free glass vase. Just go to proflowers.com and use that promo code
WWE. And hey, guys, help support our show by supporting our sponsors. Use my code WWE. And you get a set the delivery date at proflowers.com. And the best thing to do, Conrad, I like to send it to work. Because then they get the flowers at work. Everybody's talking, who sent flowers? Who sent that? And then you become babyface, man. You're the hero.
This is simple. Pick your flowers, then check out in 2 minutes. Here's the only way to get 1 dozen assorted roses with a free glass vase. Starting at only $19.99. Just go to proflowers.com and use that promo code
WWE.
Help support our show by supporting our sponsors. Use that promo code
WWE.
That's proflowers.com. Click on the microphone and then type in the code
WWE. Don't wait. Order today. Don't get shut out for Valentine's Day.
So let's talk about Shane McMahon. This is something that everybody has talked about for years and years and years. It's King of the Ring. And believe it or not, on this pay-per-view, and I think this gets lost in the shuffle, Kurt is competing in the King of the Ring, trying to become the first man to win it back-to-back. He wrestles 3 times this night. He has a match with Christian that goes about 8 minutes. He has a match with Edge that goes about 10 minutes. And then he has the 26-minute match that we all remember against Shane McMahon. It's a street fight that Kurt would win, but in the process, break his tailbone pretty early into the match. And that happens when Shane gives him a belly-to-belly suplex on the floor. And Kurt's going to wrestle the rest of this match in a lot of pain. But what everybody remembers is the spot where Kurt tries to suplex Shane through a glass panel that was on the stage. And Kurt has put it out there that they got the wrong kind of glass, where they were supposed to use some form of sugar glass, but it was a different type of glass, and it just wouldn't break. So this looked bad. And I imagine that you're in the back on a headset right next to Vince McMahon. What's going on? How does this happen? What was the plan with the glass? What's Vince's reaction when all of this is happening?
Well, Curtis said that the glass was plexiglass. The glass was not plexiglass. It was originally talked about, well, what if we had sugar glass for them to crash through? The problem with sugar glass was we had pyro throughout the night, and a lot of the pyro was set right near the entrance. The pyro blasts and concussions would have made the sugar glass shatter every time they were shut off. So the sugar glass would not have lasted all through the night to get to that one spot. So there was another glass that was used that would break, but they painted over that glass with the design, that King of the Ring design,
right,
that was on each of the glasses. And to make sure that the glass didn't shatter with the concussions, they did a double coat. Well, that double coat and the design on there, holding it all together even more, made it damn near unbreakable. That's what happened. It was not Richie Posner who would normally do these things. They had someone else that was doing the stunt aspects of everything that we did, and this was his last pay-per-view. This one in particular, due to this, because he should have known that painting the glass that he had to break would strengthen it, and then doubling up on it would strengthen it even more. But it was pure hell. It was difficult to watch. I was probably 10 feet from the action backstage. I was right behind the entrance on headset talking to the referee and running the gorilla position. Vince was 5 feet from me producing commentary and watching it. And it was one of the most uncomfortable moments I ever had in my career, I dare say even my life. Because Vince, the owner of the company, the chairman, his kid is out there getting dropped on his head over and over and over again. The only person that Vince can communicate with is me. I'm trying to communicate to the referee. Tell him to stop, abort, don't do it again. And these guys aren't listening. They're continuing to do it. Vince only has one person to take it out on, and that's me. So he's yelling and screaming and hovering over me. It was ugly. It was ugly. It was dangerous. But finally, somehow, they got through that damn glass using Shane's hard head. But before that wasn't before Shane hit the glass, slid down, hit his head, looked like he broke his neck. It was a scary match, and it was a whole scary segment to have to sit there and watch and not be able to do much of anything, because we did try telling the referee. We did tell the referee. He told the talent. You could see him on camera doing it. They just weren't listening, and they continued on. Was Linda or Shane's wife there that night? They probably, you know what? They probably were, because we were local in the area, but they weren't back. They weren't back by the gorilla position. That's for sure. What did Vince say after to you about that match? Vince and I didn't speak at all that night afterward. And that took place the next day at TV, where I wanted nothing to do with Vince. I stayed away from him, didn't want to talk to him, didn't want to be around him. It was rough. Jim Ross came and got me. Hey, boy, boss wants to talk to you. And I'm thinking, oh, shit. Why is this your fault? Because I was there. So I go back into the locker room, and JR came with me, and Vince asked JR to leave. Now, a couple things can happen here. Usually somebody stays as a witness to the conversation, or somebody take notes so that, you know, you have a record of the meeting, just in everything in business type situation. And Vince told JR to leave, which he was uncomfortable doing, because it was, dude, when I say it was heated, it was heated. there were people in between us. And so now this next day, now I'm in a room with him all by himself, and he looks at me and says, "Hey, I owe you an apology, pal." I'm like, okay. And he went through the whole thing that he never should have done that, and so on and so forth. And then looks at me and says, "God damn it, Bruce. When I get like that, you need to just shut me down. You just got, pal, you got to just cut it off. Goddamn, everything we've been through. And we have that kind of relationship. You just need to say, Vince, you're being an asshole. Knock it off." Now I'm looking at him, and if you had been there the night before and seen him in the throes of anger that he was going through, and the only person between him and his son who's landing on his head getting the shit kicked out of him is me, and I'm trying, I could just see it. God damn it, Todd! God damn it, I fucking kill you. Vince, shut up. Just bring it down a notch, Pally. Like that's gonna fucking work. Are you ribbing me? Vince, you stop. Go to your corner. Time out. Bad boy. Bad chairman. Fuck. Please. But we hugged it out. Shook hands. Everything was great. Till the next time.
After the match, both Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon would make a visit to the hospital. Do you know if they stayed overnight?
No. Neither one of them did. But they had to go get checked out, see what bones were broken, and make sure that they were really still breathing. But if you have a loved one that's in the hospital and you're in need of an attorney, just go to RGT, the number 4, law.com. They can help you out. Here's some more information.
Have you or a loved one been affected by mesothelioma? You may not have to file a lawsuit to get a recovery. Go to rgtforlaw.com and fill out the easy form for more information. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
So coming out of this match, we immediately start talking about the invasion angle, which we're going to get into in a big way. If you're a younger fan, you may not remember, but the WWF actually purchased WCW and then the naming rights to ECW as well. So now they're going to recreate kind of this old Monday Night Wars feud, and this culminates in the Invasion pay-per-view in July, which does huge business for the WWE at the time. And the main event features Team WWF with Steve Austin, The Undertaker, Kane, and Chris Jericho against the alliance of WCW and ECW, featuring Booker T, the Dudley Boys, DDP, and Rhino. Ultimately, the alliance wins the match when Austin by hitting Angle with a Stone Cold Stunner, which leads to 2 days after the pay-per-view on the July 24th episode of SmackDown in his hometown of Pittsburgh, Kurt Angle would defeat Booker T to win the WCW world title. I find that fascinating that, in hindsight, I think a lot of people just gloss over that, but Kurt Angle is technically a WCW world champion too.
Well, technically, yeah. How long ago was it that we changed it from WCW champion to just the world champion?
The next year, or 2 years later. We'll get to there. Would Kurt continue as a babyface entering this angle with Steve Austin for the WWF title because you really wanted those two guys to work together, or is it just natural since Steve turned, automatically anything Angle does is babyface?
It was a natural, and yes. Yes, they were great together. They were great together in the ring. They were great together out of the ring. They had tremendous chemistry, and everything they did just seemed to magically work.
They do an Angle in Kurt's hometown of Pittsburgh for the Unforgiven pay-per-view. But I guess what these guys are most probably remembered for are two things. They're singing backstage, Kurt with his little baby guitar and his little baby hat, and Austin singing just horribly off key and having a good time doing it. You really get to see another side of Austin during this time period. But you also get to see Steve Austin Appreciation Night, the night after SummerSlam on Raw, and Angle ruins it by driving a milk truck into the arena and spraying down members of the Alliance with milk, kind of as a parody of when Austin did this with a beer truck back in '99 for the McMahons. Whose idea was this? This is pretty smart to have Kurt come out and spray milk, being the all-American boy.
Well, it was monkey see, monkey do. Austin had done it with the beer, so what would the American hero, Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle do? Brian Gewirtz, again, had just a ton of great ideas, and this was Brian's idea to do the milk truck. Bring it in and have Kurt replicate what Austin had done years ago with the beer and turn those faucets on Austin himself.
Was this real milk?
Yeah, it was real milk.
That seems like the worst decision ever, to spray people with milk. That cannot smell good very long.
Wait a minute. Are you going to tell me that spraying people with milk is worse than spraying people with human waste?
Y'all didn't actually use shoot shit.
We actually used a shoot septic tank, yes.
Fuck
and it had
you.
shoot shit in it.
No, you didn't.
Yes, we did. Now, it was fake.
Y'all shot.
It was fake shit. It was fake shit that was like made, but it was with a real septic truck they could not get clean. That was a disaster. That was another one from the great prop folks. That
shout out to a friend of the show, Jeff Jewett. He's rocking those septic tanks. Help me understand. Somebody thought it was a good idea to shoot shit at people.
Yeah. Well, the original idea was obviously that it would be Hollywood shit, but when they got the septic truck had real shit in it, and you can't just clean out a septic truck completely. So that's another show.
Yeah, we'll get to that. It's just
crazy, huh?
I didn't expect we'd be talking about this today. There is an angle that they run where Austin steals Kurt Angle's medals and then throws them into the Detroit River. What was the fascination at the time with Austin throwing shit in the river? It feels like he threw Kurt Angle's medals in there. He threw the Rock's Intercontinental Belt in there. Did you guys have like a go-to bridge? Well, hell, boy, let's just have Austin throw some more shit off in the river.
Well, that guy lived in the van down there by the river.
In a van down by the river.
Sure. You throw something in the river, you're never getting it back, damn it. It goes down, the river, the water flows, and when the object hits, it just goes, and it goes down out into the ocean or wherever the hell that the river water thing goes to, and you never see it again. So that's the idea behind a bridge in a river. See, here, Conrad. Well, first, you find a bridge. Well, and then you get to, to the bridge, and it's got the water, down below in the brook, not Hogan, but it's babbling, and you take the object, and you toss it, and it goes into the water, and then it's gone. That's heat. That's heat.
Pick up your shirt right now, available at brucepritchard.com in a variety of colors. You don't want to miss it. I'm telling you, you're going to love the way you look in a brand new Bruce Prichard tee. Go to brucepritchard.com. Lots of fun inventory there. So the next week on Raw, the Alliance presents Austin with a new truck, and Austin reenacts a scene from Titanic in the bed of the truck, stretching his arms out and screaming, "I'm the king of the world!" And then,
I'm the king of the world.
There you go. Angle comes out and hits Austin in the back with a pipe, and then kidnaps him, and eventually takes him, shows him he's at a bridge, and then says he's not done, goes to another bridge, He continually torments him throughout the remainder of the show using blindfolds and chains and all kinds of silliness. Whose idea is this to kidnap Austin and threaten to throw him off a bridge?
I believe this was Vince's idea, and this whole wonderful evening of bridge drama was produced by Vince and I.
There is a phenomenal line in here where Angle, he's blindfolded Austin, and he tells Austin to cry, and if he doesn't cry, he's going to throw him over the bridge. I need you to, in Steve Austin's voice, and I know that's not maybe your go-to impression, can you recreate what he says right here?
I can't cry! I can't cry! I can't cry.
Thank you. Austin calls himself a jackass, and then Angle demands a rematch for the WWF title at Unforgiven, and Austin, of course, immediately agrees and then demands he be uncuffed and let go. But Angle says, too bad, you're still going in the water, and pushes him backwards, and he falls into a kiddie pool that was filled with water.
God damn, it'll be great. He goes in right into that kiddie pool. Yeah.
Lots of kiddie pools in WWE, whether it's at Brian Pillman's house or, I mean, Kurt Angle is just another person in a long string of Steve Austin and kiddie pool moments in the WWE.
Kiddie pools are over.
Well, it seems like they were back then, that's for sure.
Hey, you dump somebody in a kiddie pool, man, that's going to draw money.
It's kind of like when you come out of a box. If you go in
You're
a kiddie
over.
pool, you go, yeah, same thing.
Exactly.
September 10th, 2001. Kurt Angle defeats Rob Van Dam for the hardcore title. And of course, in the hardcore matches here, it's false count anywhere and the title's defended 24/7. So Angle has RVD tap out with an ankle lock on stage. A few seconds later, Austin runs out and pushes Angle off the stage. And then Austin throws RVD off. But the way they land, RVD pins Angle, just over a minute later. Of course, the next day is the 9/11 terrorist attacks that we all know what happened there. And then the subsequent SmackDown show from Houston. On that show, Kurt Angle would defeat Rhino in the very last match, which was fitting, him being our Olympic hero. On September 23rd at Unforgiven, Kurt wins the WWF title from Austin, making him tap out to the ankle lock. And I find this interesting because it happens in his hometown. The whole Angle family comes in. They celebrate with Kurt, lift him up on their shoulders. And so now at this point, if you're keeping track, Kurt has won world titles at this point from The Rock and Steve Austin. Does it get much bigger than this?
Yeah, it'd be hard to beat. But Kurt tells the story that he called Vince. I don't know who called Vince because we all kind of had the same idea. We're coming off 9/11. Our country's been attacked by foreign forces. We just wanted to do our part to give people a feel-good moment. Just, give them a moment to celebrate and be happy about. And the finish was changed from Steve going over in Kurt's hometown. We thought, well, damn it, this is one of those exceptions. Kurt's in his hometown. Let's have him go over. He's got his whole family there, celebrate, give the country, give America, give everybody a opportunity to celebrate and have something to feel good about. And that was the reasoning behind that.
It worked. It was a kudos to you guys. It was a very cool moment. On the October 8th Raw, fast forwarding a little bit, Austin would win the belt back from Angle. When Commissioner Regal, who was ringside for the match, would hit Angle with the title belt, and that would allow Austin to then use the stunner and win the belt. So you guys just wanted a cool moment. It wasn't really the long-term plan for Kurt to keep the belt, but it was a way to, acknowledge our Olympic hero in his hometown at a time where that had maybe some more meaning. So it was just a quick title run. Does that make sense? Would you agree?
Exactly. That's exactly what it was, because Kurt was not supposed to win the championship there, but it was a little detour along the way. We still got back where we wanted to with the title on Steve.
Kurt would briefly win the U.S. title from Rhino in October, and he would turn heel and join the Alliance. So at this point, he's really racking up the titles, guys. He's had the WCW World title. He's had all the WWF belts, including the Hardcore belt. And now he's even got the U.S. title. He would lose it a few weeks later to Edge on Raw. And they really start turning up the volume on these Kurt and Austin comedic skits where they've got a real intense rivalry, but it's based on Vince McMahon, or it's based on who's a better singer, or who can do this better, who can do that better, who produced these skits. Is this another Brian deal, or are you involved in these?
No, this was Brian would write the outline for them, but these were all me. This was some of the most fun I've ever had in the business, because while we had an outline, Steve, myself, Vince, Kurt, we all collaborated, and Steve would have a lot of time at home because he was healing up. The reason we did so many of these backstage vignettes was because both guys, Steve and Angle, were hurt, and we couldn't have them working every week on TV. They needed time to heal up. So we did these backstage segments to help them out and give them that time. They had such natural chemistry. Steve had so much time to think. He would come to TV with ideas. He'd walk through the airport. The cowboy hats. He's walking through the airport in San Antonio, sees these hats, gets the hats, and he saw the little tiny cowboy hat, the kid's hats. Oh, that'd be perfect for Kurt. And he picks up a guitar, and all of a sudden he's going to sing. He did the Kumbaya. It was just some of the most fun because we never knew exactly what the hell we were going to do. We knew we're coming back here for this segment. Here's what we need to get out of this. We need to make this match for later on in the evening, or we need to plug this piece of business. But the interaction was fresh, and I dare say it's terrible to admit this and say it, but we tried to pre-tape a lot of that stuff earlier in the day, but we probably fiddle-fucked around most of the day just so we can get to the live show and have all those segments go live. They were just better. They were more spontaneous, and Vince didn't have a clue a lot of times what the hell was going to come out of Austin's mouth. Kurt just reacted. And look, I produced them. I loved them, so I'm partial. I thought it was some of the best stuff that they ever did.
No, I totally agree. And if you haven't seen this stuff in a while, it still stands up. It's still funny today. It's still good stuff.
Kumbaya, my Lord, Kumbaya. Steve was a great singer. What a voice.
On November 18th at the Survivor Series, Kurt is on Team Alliance, which consists of Angle, Austin, RVD, Booker T, and Shane McMahon. And they take on Team WWF, which is The Rock, Undertaker, Kane, Jericho, and Big Show. We're going to talk about the invasion angle in great detail another time. But this match is billed as winner take all to determine the fate of these companies. Do you think this is the proper way to end it right here?
I think timing wise, it was the time to end it. I'm not sure it was the proper way to end it, but it was time to end it. It was a failed experiment with the WCW brand, and we needed to just move on. And this was a way to move on.
The Rock ultimately pins Austin to win the match, and the WWF survives. The next night on Raw, Vince was going to strip Austin of the WWF title and give it to Kurt because of Kurt's actions the previous night. However, right before he was going to hand him the title, Ric Flair makes his return to the company and announces that he's purchased Stephanie and Shane's stock. So now he and Vince are partners, and we know what kind of spins out of control there with Austin and Flair at Royal Rumble in a street fight. But before we get there, Austin comes out and attacks Kurt, takes his belt back, and seemingly is turned babyface again. So a few weeks later at Vengeance 2001, and this is a show we've had on the poll before, and I hope to have again because it's the first time they unified the titles and crowned an undisputed champion. Kurt wrestles Austin for the WWF title, with the winner advancing later that night to face the winner of Jericho and Rock for the WCW title, and this would combine both. Kurt would lose to Austin, and Jericho would beat The Rock, and then Jericho would beat Austin to become the first undisputed champ. Kurt has said that this was originally supposed to be him, and 5 days beforehand it changed. Do you recall, is that true? And what would have made it change? Because it seems like Kurt would have been a more logical choice here based on what had happened. This made Jericho, no doubt about it. But was that the thinking? This is an opportunity to make Jericho rather than continue the push of Kurt Angle?
Well, you just made the point, yes. And it was an opportunity to make somebody new. Everybody was discussed, from Angle winning the thing to Steve to Rock and Jericho. And Jericho was probably the least likely. If you were betting on it, you would bet that Jericho would have the best odds, because no one would believe Jericho was going to beat those former champions in that situation in that match. So it was the shock value of Jericho becoming the first undisputed champion, and Kurt didn't really need it, but it was never set in stone that we're going to do this with Kurt. It was discussed several times and debated back and forth many, many times.
Who would have been the guy campaigning for Jericho?
I don't know that any one person campaigned for Jericho. It came about in one of those what if sessions. What if it's Rock? What if it's Austin? What if it's Angle? Wait a minute, what the fuck? What if it's Jericho? Nobody's buying that. Nobody's going to call that. Okay, so why not go there? Is there a reason not to go there? So it was born from that, and then everybody getting to think about it, and everybody got on board with, hey, this is a great call. Let's do it with Jericho.
So Royal Rumble 2002 rolls around, and Kurt is down to the final two with Triple H, who's returning here, and Triple H ultimately gets the win. And this is a big deal for Triple H to return at this time. You guys were rocking some Creed videos like crazy. So Kurt and Triple H's No Way Out pay-per-view match would be to determine whether or not Triple H could keep his title shot at WrestleMania 18 against Jericho. Kurt wins the match after Stephanie interferes, but they do a rematch the next night, and Triple H gets his shot back. So the stage is set for WrestleMania 18. Triple H is going to face Chris Jericho for the world title in the main event, and Kurt is going to wrestle Kane. Do you remember the decision of the pairing for Kurt and Kane here?
It was just simply to get Kurt out of that mix and get Kurt a decent opponent for WrestleMania 18, which is why we had Kurt go out during the Rumble and throw Kane out. Just a little nugget to get that started, so their match would mean a little more.
A week after this WrestleMania, they do the very first draft between Raw and SmackDown. Third overall. What's the decision to split the shows here? Is it to kind of create your own competition, since this alliance angle and ECW and WCW fallen by the wayside?
Yeah, after the failed experiment with WCW having its own brand, which was the original idea, splitting Raw and SmackDown was the next best thing to do. So Raw would be its own brand, SmackDown would be its own brand, and it's an opportunity to expose more talent over a week and not have to repeat so much talent on both shows, make the shows unique. It's talent base. Let's
pick up the pace a little bit. Let's get to Judgment Day, and this is in Nashville, and we've got Kurt paired with Edge. This is the culmination of a match they had at Backlash. So this is a little bit of a feud now for a couple of pay-per-views. But the reason Judgment Day is notable is because this is where Edge wins the match and Kurt has to shave his head. This is kind of old school classic, the head shave, the hair match where somebody gets their head shaved. Kurt has said this was Vince's idea for him to shave his head because Vince wanted him to look tougher. I call bullshit. I say Kurt was balding and Vince thought it would be a better look. What really happened?
Kurt was balding and it was a better look. That's exactly what it was. He wasn't about looking tougher. It was about you're young and you've got a receding hairline back to your ears. Let's just go ahead and shave the rest of it off. Get rid of it. And in the whole scenario, we had some fun stuff with Kurt coming out in his wrestler's headgear with a wig underneath it. Stole that from Gino Hernandez in Houston, who lost a loser leave hair match, came back wearing a mask with a wig sewn into it. Later on, Buddy Roberts of the Fabulous Freebirds, who lost his hair with that magical hair loss cream, and he wore a boxer's headgear with a wig under it. So what better thing for Kurt, who naturally wore wrestling headgear in his amateur days, have him wear wrestling headgear to the ring and put a wig underneath that.
King of the Ring 2002, Kurt is programmed with Hulk Hogan, which is a couple of names you never really thought you'd see together. But yeah, here they are, and Kurt wins the match, making Hogan tap to the ankle lock. Bruce, there's lots of rumor and innuendo that this is the first time that Hulk Hogan has submitted in a WWF match. Do you recall that even being a discussion going into this?
Well, it's the first time that I can remember it ever happening, and I want to say that it was Hogan's idea to do the tap out. And Hogan working with Kurt was always funny because Hulk was a little fragile at this point, not the Hogan of his youth. And Hogan had a nickname for Kurt. I think he was like Olympic Boy. But they enjoyed working together. Hogan had the idea, well, I should tap out to him. And then they had a great match. I thought Kurt got an awful lot out of Hogan.
The internet has villainized Hulk Hogan, brother, for a long time for not wanting to do jobs and push guys down and hold them in their spot and play the politic game. And you just said Hogan volunteered to submit to Angle.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure we'll talk about that Hogan run at some point in the very near future. We're back to Vengeance on July 21st. Kurt's in the main event, this time in a triple threat with The Undertaker and The Rock. The Rock is going to win the match here and the title by pinning Angle. Kurt starts to hold open challenges on SmackDown. Here's something noteworthy. One of the guys who responds on July 27th is John Cena. Kurt wins the match with a roll-up. Any memories of this and why it was picked for Cena's debut? Because Cena would have been in OVW prior to this, working as the Prototype. Before that, working out in California with Bassman and his bunch at UPW. And now here he is in a totally different look. It doesn't look like the John Cena of today. And he's paired with Kurt Angle, who was an advocate for Cena and who decided to program him with Kurt and make the debut this way.
I am Prototype. John was on his way up to the roster. He was there. He was ready to move up. We were looking for something special for John. This was simply a way to introduce Cena onto the roster. It was nothing. There was no angle there with Kurt. There was no program with Kurt. It was simply a way to introduce Cena to the audience. Nothing more, nothing less. We were all advocates, just like he is now and today. But it was right time, right place. Kurt issuing these open challenges, it all made sense. So here's an unknown coming from the back that no one's seen or heard from before, and have a great showing with Kurt.
After a lot of fanfare and obviously a lot of accolades in Mexico and in WCW, Rey Mysterio finally makes his WWF debut. Lots of vignettes, a cool little treatment with his entrance, the blue contacts, the mask is back. There's been a lot of time and effort and energy invested in Rey Mysterio, so let's program him with Kurt at SummerSlam for his debut match. What a way to debut at SummerSlam with our Olympic hero, who's a Grand Slam champion and done everything. This is quite the debut for Mysterio. except he loses. What the fuck is this?
He's wrestling Olympic gold medalist, multi-time WWF champion. What's so bad about that?
Why do you guys insist on he was a big star in WCW? Let's put him in a hot angle to start, but let's fucking beat him.
I'm sorry, how many main events did he main event in WCW? How many times was he world champion in WCW? Okay, that's what I thought. He was a big star in Mexico. He had been on WCW TV, obviously. I dare say that WCW did not feature him the way that he should have been featured. But Vince didn't see him.
Yeah, he should
as
just
a big
fucking
star.
lose his debut. That's a better way to feature him. Here's what I don't understand about
to a
you.
WWF world champion?
He's not champ here. Fuck off.
Yeah, but he was champion, multi-time champion.
Why would you go to all the trouble of, we're going to put him in the mask, we're going to do the contacts, we're going to do this fun entrance, we're going to do these vignettes, we're going to make it a big deal, you've got to buy the pay-per-view to see him. Beat him.
So he should beat Kurt Angle in his first night in.
Well, how about don't program him with Kurt Angle if you don't want him to go?
We didn't program him with Kurt Angle. We brought him in for one match with Kurt Angle at a pay-per-view for his debut to give him the best opportunity to shine in a spotlight match. Would you have rather had him work with Brooklyn Brawler?
I didn't know those were the only two options, dickhead.
That's only two options. That's it. Everybody else was booked.
But you don't see that this is a pattern?
No, it's not a pattern. What pattern?
Taz goes and wins the ECW belt as a WWF
Okay, well, hang on.
performer.
Wait a minute. Okay, so Taz debuts and beats Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's okay.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be done.
Taz, who was a world champion over at ECW, he beats him. Ray, who never had a world title anywhere else.
Oh, my God.
Comes in, who was a cruiserweight
Oh, God.
at WCW, wants to come in and beat our heavyweight champion, first night in, Olympic gold medalist.
Who says beat the champ? Pick
You
another.
did. You said, why'd you lose? You should have beat Kurt.
I didn't say he should have beat Kurt. I said program him with somebody else.
Well, brought him in, spotlighted him, put him in a feature match with Olympic gold medalist and former WWF champion. They had a great match. And
Oh, my God.
Spotlight
This
Ray's
is so
talents.
dumb. I mean,
And
the Radicals debut, and y'all fucking beat them. Ray Mysterio debuts.
It really killed Ray's career, didn't it?
Why do we even talk? Why are we friends?
Who said we're friends?
Great. Fucker.
Awesome.
Not long after this, Angle and Benoit are teaming up at the No Mercy pay-per-view on October 20th, and they win the tag titles. This officially makes Kurt a Grand Slam winner. That's the only belt that had eluded him. Eventually, they start arguing, and they drop the belts to Edge and Mysterio.
Right there, Mysterio goes over.
Oh, whoopee.
You happy now?
Yes, I'm just tickled. Survivor Series 2002, Kurt and Benoit team up in a triple threat against Eddie and Chavo, Edge and Mysterio. Eddie and Chavo win the titles there. We're back at Armageddon, and Kurt wins his third WWE title, this time defeating The Big Show with a little help from Brock Lesnar. So let's recap now. Kurt's a three-time WWE champion, and his three victories in order were The Rock, Steve Austin, and The Big Show. And this is when The Big Show was still a pretty damn big deal. He's working main events. He's main evented WrestleMania. This is a big accomplishment to have your first three runs go like that. He starts to become managed, at least briefly, by Paul Heyman, and then Team Angle debuts. And this is something we got a lot of tweets about, Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin being paired with Kurt Angle. Would this have been an idea that Kurt would have pitched, or whose idea would Team Angle have been, and how did you guys go about selecting these two?
They were a natural fit because Shelton Benjamin from the University of Minnesota, a great amateur wrestler in his own right. Charlie Haas from Seton Hall, another great amateur wrestler. So as to pit the amateurs under Kurt's tutelage in real life, both Shelton and Charlie did look up to Kurt as kind of a guru and had a lot of respect for Kurt being an Olympic gold medalist. So made them Team Angle. They were very alike and thought that this would help Haas and Benjamin. Heyman, being a spokesman, was there to try and help Haas and Benjamin, who weren't the best on promos.
Right.
Allow me, sir, to have another volley. I believe I can help these young lads. So Heyman wasn't necessarily there so much for Kurt as he was for Benjamin and Haas.
Since we're talking about impressions, what did Pat Patterson think about Kurt Angle? We haven't talked about him at all on this episode.
Oh, my God, I love him. He does the move, boy, and the ankle lock. I don't know, the capitaceous in the chase. I love the Kurt Angle. He's the greatest. I'll give him any time. If only he could work with Shawn Michaels.
Oh, thank you for that.
Oh, boy, what a match that would be.
What did
I could teach him a thing or two.
Let's move on. The Royal Rumble 2003 pay-per-view, Kurt defends the WWE title against Benoit. Angle wins the match when Benoit taps to the ankle lock, which they're really getting over. And now we're headed towards WrestleMania 19. Lots of people want to know about this match in particular and the one spot. But before we talk about it, let's kind of set the stage. At this point, Kurt is hurting in a big way. He's having a lot of problems with his neck. And there's a question as to whether or not they can even pull this off. So Kurt starts working a limited schedule, and there's even discussion of having Brock beat Kurt for the belt on SmackDown just a couple weeks prior to WrestleMania and doing it in like a minute, like a squash match. But Kurt decides he wants to wrestle at WrestleMania, and instead they just substitute Kurt's brother once again as a decoy, and that allows Kurt to run in the ring and roll up Brock from behind for the pin. How close was this pay-per-view main event of Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle to not happening?
It really wasn't that close, and you have to rely on talent to be honest with you and tell you if they can go or not, how much they're hurting. And Kurt coming back, giving us the feedback, no, I'm good to go. I can do it. I'm fine. I just need some rest. We gave him rest during this time off of house shows, not having to go out and wrestle every single night. So we masked that as best that we could to get the match in the ring and get him to WrestleMania. But had he come to us, weeks before and say, hey, I can't go, then we might have discussed, okay, what do we do? But he came and said, hey, I'm hurting, but I can go. So you got to take talent at their word at that point.
Would this have been $1 million payday for him in the main event of WrestleMania 19?
Boy, I don't know.
North of 500?
I don't know. He probably had a very good day.
My point is, a lot of people are going to look back and criticize, if he was that hurt, he shouldn't have done it. It's $1 million. A lot of people are going to do a lot of things for 20 minutes for $1 million.
Here comes the money. Here we go. Money.
They do for a lot longer than that.
Stressed over money? Drowning in debt? Credit cards maxed out? Overwhelmed with mounting medical bills? Bad credit? 500refi.com can help you save $600, $700, even $800 per month. Even if you've been turned down for credit before, the second chance you've been looking for is 500refi.com. Interest rates are at historic lows. How much can you save with a better mortgage that consolidates your debt, personal loans, car notes, and even your second mortgage into one lower monthly payment? It's free to find out at 500refi.com.
So here we are, WrestleMania 19, March 30th, 2003, Safeco Field in Seattle. Kurt does defend the belt against Brock Lesnar, but he can't get the W in the end. But there was a scary moment, and I think everybody remembers this. Brock goes for a shooting star press halfway across the ring, misjudges, and lands on his head. And Kurt has to take over for a few minutes. Ultimately, Lesnar still gets the win, but it was clear, to use an old school phrase, Brock Lesnar had his bell rung that night. What was the reaction for this? Is this, you've kind of joked about it, but is this a Michael Hayes, what if you could do a shooting star press? Because there's rumor and innuendo that he was doing this in Ohio Valley and hitting it no problem. So who first pitches the idea of a shooting star press from Brock Lesnar?
I think Heyman originally pitched the idea because of Brock doing it in Ohio Valley Wrestling. And Brock also seconded that and said, yeah, I can do that. And it would be a great, spectacular finish for the last match, WrestleMania, for this big monster to hit a shooting star press. Obviously, he didn't hit it, and he fell right on his head. the fear backstage was, oh my God, he broke his neck. It was a nasty, nasty bump. But they, as you said, man, they persevered. They got through it. That was supposed to be the finish of the match. They had to call an audible, but they made it work with Brock walking out with the championship as he was supposed to. But the reaction backstage was sheer terror because it looked ugly. It was ugly. And you could tell that he was pretty hurt.
The audible that's called, are you in the headsets or Vince in the who's making that audible, or the performers? Is Kurt just the veteran? I mean, he's not really, but he's been in the business a few years at that point. Is he just calling it?
At that point, he's calling it.
Okay.
I was not on headset then. I was at Gorilla, but I wasn't on headset. I was just there.
Kurt has said since that the WWE knew that he had a benign tumor in his neck before WrestleMania, but the doctors for the WWE wouldn't tell him until after the event. You call bullshit on that?
I can tell you, I certainly didn't know, and this is the first time I've ever heard of that.
Just right now?
Yes.
That seems really difficult for me to stomach, that they wouldn't tell him.
Well, it's difficult to stomach if that's actually true. I don't know that that's true.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's true. Let me be clear about that. I'm just saying it's really hard for me to imagine that anybody is that flippant. I'm like, we'll just tell him later. No,
and as much of an asshole as Vince McMahon can be perceived to be, he would never do that. If somebody was hurt and he doesn't want them hurt on his watch, and he does care more about the long-term wellness of the performer. And I know that doesn't fit the narrative that everybody has of the evil emperor Vince McMahon. He really does care, and he doesn't want his talent to be hurt. He would rather forego this to have them for several more years. So I don't buy it. I didn't know that. First time I'd ever even heard of anything like that. Kurt wanted time off. Kurt wanted to rest up. He was banged up. And that was what I remember from the whole situation.
On April 11th, Kurt would undergo neck surgery to repair some nerve damage, some bone spurs, some disc problems. He refuses the spinal fusion surgery, which is considered much more permanent, much more dangerous, much longer recovery time, instead opting for a new procedure where the doctor goes in from the front and removes the spurs and cleans up the problem areas. And this greatly reduces Kurt's recovery time compared to the traditional fusion. Was there any worry about Kurt coming back so soon, or this surgery being risky because it wasn't proven? Do you remember this particular surgery kind of changing the way people thought about neck injuries for a little while?
All the above. The doctor was, I believe his name was Dr. Go, and the surgery was revolutionary because going in through the throat, you didn't have that whole trauma on your spinal cord. There was no fusion, and he felt that if he cleaned out the spurs and was able to clean out the area that was damaged, that everything would be fine. Since the surgery was less invasive than a traditional fusion surgery, the recovery time was a lot quicker. And I dare say that Kurt felt like he could come back in a couple weeks. We just didn't let him. We wanted to make sure that he was healed because Kurt was the first that we knew of, and he was the first of talent and athletes that we knew of that had this type of surgery. So the jury was still out whether or not it was going to be successful and whether or not it would hold for any length of time. So, yeah, there was definitely concern about Kurt coming back and what kind of shape he was going to be in going forward.
Kurt's only out for 3 months, and then when he comes back to SmackDown, he's a babyface. Most of the time, whenever you have a top star, go away, the fans are so happy to see them return that they get a babyface pop either way. But this spells the end of Team Angle. We're at Vengeance 2003 now, July 27th, and Kurt wins his 4th WWE title in a triple threat match against Brock Lesnar and Big Show. So again, let's look at the folks Kurt has beat for his WWF titles. The Rock, Steve Austin, Big Show, and now Brock Lesnar. At SummerSlam, Kurt successfully defended the title against Brock Lesnar, making him tap out to the ankle lock. And there's rumor and innuendo here. We can't talk about these guys much longer without talking about the impromptu shoot that happened in the ring between Kurt and Brock before the doors opened. So to kind of set the stage, the production crew would set up a ring and all the lighting rigs and all the screens and the stage and all that stuff before the show. And hours before the doors open, the boys go down and just in their street clothes and workout gear and warm-up gear and kind of work through some stuff and kind of walk through some matches and some ideas and some spots. Producers are there, agents are there. They're just really preparing for the show. Well, at one of these such meetings, Kurt and Brock start mouthing off to each other about who could really do what with who in a shoot fight, a legitimate amateur wrestling match, which is obviously their backgrounds. And I have to imagine you were here for this, Bruce. What really happened?
Well, this was a culmination of weeks, maybe even months, of the boys backstage stirring the pot. Here you've got two world-class athletes in Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, both amateurs, both at the top of their game, both legitimate tough guys. So the boys kind of poking both bears with sharp sticks, and guys going to Brock Lesnar and saying, hey, Brock, Kurt said he'd take you, no problem. Then going to Kurt and saying, wow, man, did you hear what Brock said about you? He said he'd take those Olympic gold medals and shove them up your ass if he ever had the opportunity. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. Kurt and Brock didn't say shit to each other. And there was no argument. There was no nothing. But the talent would get each one of them riled up in their own way. Leading up to, found them both out in the ring at the same time together. And it wasn't a heated fuck you at all. It was like, okay, you want to try? Let's go. And the entire encounter lasted maybe 8 seconds, because as they started to lock up, Vince McMahon came out onto the floor and saw what was going on in the ring and abruptly, hey, God damn it, knock it off, and put a stop to it pretty damn quick. So there was no winner. There was no loser. There was guys grabbing each other that, wasn't in malice. It wasn't, I'm going to kick your ass. It was, okay, well, let's wrestle. Let's see who can spank who. That's all it was. But Vince was not happy at the boys stirring it up and taking two of his top stars and wanting them to try and shoot on each other. Not good for business.
They do an angle where Brock and Kurt become friends, and during an episode of SmackDown, Brock was going to wrestle Vince in a steel cage with Kurt as the referee, but instead, Brock attacked Kurt, aligning himself with Vince McMahon, and that sets up a 60-minute Iron Man match on SmackDown, which was a huge deal at the time. In the end, Lesnar would win with a final score of 5-4, and Iron Man matches were traditionally done on pay-per-views and house shows, not so much television. Why do this on SmackDown here?
Lazy.
Just because it fills an hour of TV?
Exactly. I say it's lazy, but I also was a big proponent of it because it was able to showcase both guys' strongest talent, and that was their wrestling. But I say it's lazy because you don't have to worry about half the show. You got 6 segments that are done. It's a match. You don't have to worry about leads and bumpers and all that other crap. So I'm just kidding about the lazy part, but it was to try something different.
And this would have never happened if WCW was around. Is that fair to say? I mean, there's no way, and I don't mean to be ugly when I say that, but it feels like in an Iron Man match, if you know it's going to go 60 minutes, if you're trying to program for quarter hours and everybody's so obsessed with ratings, then if you're kind of channel flipping back and forth and you're a fan, you just say, well, shit, I'll come back at 55 minutes.
Exactly. Kind of like a basketball game. All you need to watch is the last 2 minutes.
I mean, that's kind of true. 2003, we're at the Survivor Series now, and Kurt is going to reform Team Angle just long enough for the pay-per-view. But this time, he's got John Cena, Chris Benoit, Bradshaw, and Bob Holly on his team, and they'll take on Brock Lesnar which consists of Lesnar, Big Show, Nathan Jones, and Albert. I don't know when we'll talk about Nathan Jones again. You got any good Nathan Jones stories?
Well, I hope we don't. Nathan was from Australia. He was a former convict, big bastard. He came to us maybe through Barry Bloom out in California. Barry Bloom is the agent to Jesse the Body Ventura and several other top stars in the wrestling business. But Nathan had a unique look. He was a big bastard, and Vince just looked at him and saw dollar signs. But unfortunately, as I always have to say, eventually the bell had to ring.
So this would be a guy that Vince was enamored with?
Yes.
Any fun or interesting stories about matches or traveling or anything you can give us insightful about Nathan Jones?
No, Nathan wasn't really around long enough to give us many stories. We did some interesting vignettes with him over in the prison in Australia, but there weren't that many real interesting stories. Nathan didn't enjoy the business, didn't enjoy the travel, and just didn't hang around that long.
In that Survivor Series match, Cena and Benoit become the sole survivors. At the Royal Rumble 2004, Kurt is in the Rumble match, coming in at 19 and eliminating Goldberg in the match before being eliminated himself by the Big Show. Then he starts to form an alliance with Eddie Guerrero. Eddie is announced as the number one contender for the WWE title, though, so of course Kurt attacks him and now turns heel in the process. So, Bruce, there's lots of rumor and innuendo, and I don't know where to drop it in here, but there's rumor and innuendo that Kurt and Eddie Guerrero got into a little bit of a real fight backstage. What happened?
It was a short skirmish, and Eddie got upset. Kurt and Eddie had been out in the ring beforehand, and as I said earlier, man, Kurt Angle wants to take you and do something with you. He's going to do it. And Eddie was a little pissed off because Kurt wasn't listening to him. They came back. Eddie was pretty upset, attacked Kurt, tried to double leg Kurt and take him down. And Kurt just front face locked him before they were pulled apart very quickly. And the funniest part about it was afterwards, JBL going up to Eddie Guerrero and saying, Eddie, he's an Olympic gold medalist. What the fuck were you thinking? And Eddie just kind of putting his head down like, I know, man, I'm just so stupid. But that was it. It was just two guys pretty heated after a match. And Eddie trying to double leg Kurt. Kurt wasn't going anywhere, and it got broken up pretty quick.
Just another lesson for you. Don't challenge your Olympic hero. We're back at No Way Out, and Kurt's in a triple threat, this time against Big Show and John Cena, with the winner getting a title shot at WrestleMania 20. Kurt would win this, causing Cena to tap out to the ankle lock. Meanwhile, Brock Lesnar would lose his world title to Eddie Guerrero, which sets up WrestleMania 20. March 14th, Kurt would challenge Eddie for the WWE title, and Eddie would go on to get the victory against Kurt with an inside cradle. A pretty phenomenal match here, and I know you were really good friends with Eddie. What did it mean to Eddie Guerrero to go from all the trouble that he had earlier in his life with DUIs and addiction and being cut and WCW, all that craziness with the coffee and Bischoff, and now he's here. He beats Brock Lesnar for the world title, and he's facing an Olympic gold medalist at WrestleMania 20 in the biggest arena in the world, the most famous arena in the world, Madison Square Garden. It's got to be a big deal for your friend Eddie Guerrero.
It was a dream come true because it was what Eddie always strived for and had been passed over his entire career, probably due to his size, people not thinking that he was big enough to be able to be relatable to people. And it was an accomplishment that Eddie was very proud of, to finally be the champion of a major company and then go right into a program with an Olympic gold medalist, because Eddie had an amateur background. His whole family had amateur backgrounds. it was a natural. Some of the stuff that we did with Kurt and Eddie, where Kurt dressed up as a conquistador and all gold mask and a whole bodysuit, that was just a really entertaining time. But they had the one of the co-feature matches at WrestleMania 20, and Eddie took that upon himself that, here he was going to prove himself. This was his time. And Eddie and Kurt put so much thought and effort into that match. And my favorite story through the match was just so simple. Kurt Angle was working towards the ankle lock to get that ankle lock on Eddie. If he got the ankle lock on, it was all over. Once Kurt started going for the ankle, Eddie started untying his boot. And all through the match, you see Eddie going back to his boot and loosening his boot up and untying a few more laces and loosening that boot up more till finally Kurt Angle finally gets the ankle lock on Eddie Guerrero, puts it on him, has it hooked, and the tighter that Kurt squeezes, that damn boot just slips right out, and then they went into the finish. But it was so simple, so logical, and executed to perfection by two of the best in the world in Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle at the time. So it was a culmination and a finish that I thought was tremendous, and those guys pulled it off to a T.
Kurt is then written off television because he re-injures his neck in that match, and he's out for 5 months. So when they write him off, they do so with the Big Show choke slamming him off the ledge. But he comes back as GM of SmackDown. In my head, this is a way for him to stay on the road, stay on TV, stay hot, and keep getting paid rather than just sitting at home. Is that fair to say?
Sure it is, and it keeps him in front of the television audience, and when he's ready to come back, you just slide him in when he's ready.
And they did that exactly in July. McMahon would fire Kurt as the GM, discovering that Kurt was faking his injuries. He's really just ready to return. So at SummerSlam of 2004, Kurt would defeat Eddie Guerrero. And then at the No Mercy pay-per-view in October, he would take on Big Show, but lose that effort. On the November 4th episode of SmackDown, and this is one of the highlights that everybody's asking about, we have the segment with the Tough Enough kids, and Kurt is going to challenge all of them. Nothing really matters except what we're going to cover here. During one of the early skits here, Kurt is taking down the opponent, and in the process, he jams his head on the mat, causing his arms to go numb. This is what Kurt would say after the fact. Well, then it's Daniel Puter's turn to challenge Kurt. He's one of the Tough Enough contestants, and he gets Kurt in an arm lock. What happened, Bruce?
Well, let's start off with the idea for this. It was a shitty idea. It was shitty execution, and it was old school wrestling type booking. And yes, I had a huge part in it. And hindsight being 20/20, it was just that old school wanting to prove a point. By God, you young whippersnappers, you want to be in this business. You're not tough enough to be in the business. You get one of the tough guys on the roster to stretch them and make them think twice about ever wanting to be in this business. Not a good idea. It's a terrible idea in hindsight. But at the time, sounded fun, sounded like a good thing to do. Tough Enough was a legitimate competition for those guys. They were fighting for a contract in the WWE, and they were really going through all of that for real. It was real to them. The issue becomes, which I have preached, and I was guilty of not following my own preaching, if you will. You don't mix work and shoot.
Right.
And by doing that, you're teaching guys to work, but they're in a shoot environment, in a contest environment. That if they win this contest that the audience is voting on, they win a contract for WWF contract. That all was real. In that, you take somebody to go out and beat them up or stretch them. That was the old school thinking in us that got us in trouble here. Originally, I'd wanted Big Show to be the guy out there because I didn't think anybody could move Big Show.
Right.
There's not a whole lot you can do with a giant. And Big Show's deceptively strong. Another suggestion was Mark Henry. Same thing, the world's strongest man. If Mark Henry didn't want to move, there wasn't anybody out there that could have moved him. And then, of course, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle, Olympic gold medalist, legitimate tough guy, legitimate badass. And Kurt volunteered for the spot and wanted to do it. Paul Heyman wanted to put Nunzio out there. Paul Heyman felt that Nunzio would be best, that Nunzio was this tough guy trained by Billy Robinson that could stretch any and everybody. But Kurt was adamant. Kurt came and pled his case to Vince, pled his case to all of us that he was the guy, that he would be able to handle anything that anybody threw at him. And like the suckers we were, we bit and said, okay, yeah, Kurt, Olympic gold medalist, he'll be fine. Knowing, again, hindsight is 20/20. You got Kurt out there. He is riddled with injury. He's not the Kurt Angle of 1996. This is a different Kurt Angle, different shape, a lot of injuries. And we didn't really know what the hell we had on the other side. So when Kurt went out, the instructions were very clear and very simple. You take the guy that wins the contest, you have your little match with them, and that is it. You don't do anybody else. You don't do more than one. You just do the one guy, and that is it. Could not have been clearer.
Right.
So after Kurt does it, Kurt landed on his head, as you said, and he got a stinger. But Kurt's fired up now. Kurt's pissed off because in his mind he's thinking, oh, shit, maybe I was embarrassed there. He really wasn't, but in his mind, I'm paraphrasing and I'm putting thoughts and words in his mouth, that he then opened it up. I'll take any of you. And Daniel Puder, young, fresh, shoot fighter, amateur background, raises his hand. Hey, I'll take you. Well, Kurt being so pissed off that anybody would challenge him to come into the ring and actually get into a ring in a real contest with Kurt Angle. Well, by God, get in here. I'll show you something. And Puder got in and got him. He got his arm hooked. So Kurt had nothing else really that he could do at that point. Didn't want to break his arm, so got him down on the mat on his back and went for the pin. We had the referee count 1, 2, 3 because Puder's shoulders were down. But he also had Kurt, had him hooked. And it wasn't going to look good for this kid to beat Kurt. So thank God his amateur took over and get him on his back where he thinks he's in a shoot fight and it's going to be a tap. And thank God it didn't get that far. And thank God that Puder didn't hurt Kurt. But it was embarrassing. It was not a good scene. And it all could have been avoided. Better judgment on our part, having more foresight into what the hell could have happened, and had Kurt, I'm gonna throw a little blame his way. He was told not to do anybody beyond the one guy that he did.
Right.
And his ego and everything else took over, and he was going to prove something. It's just a bad scene, just bad situation. I wish it had gone different.
The move was called a key lock by Taz on the show. MMA enthusiasts would recognize this as a Kimura from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Ultimately, though, as we all remember, as he has this hooked, his shoulders himself are down. So the referee counts him down to 3, and now we have an embarrassing situation. What type of heat, if any, was there on Daniel for this?
I think that the heat came from old school guys. How dare you want to try a pro like that? And that comes from ego. That comes from that old school tradition of, my God, what we do is real, and how dare you challenge us because we're the toughest guys in the world. He was, as I said before, he was trying to win a contest. He was trying to prove himself. And it took balls for him to get up and volunteer to do that. but it wasn't the smartest thing on his part to do, because in his training for Tough Enough, you are also teaching these guys that this is a work, this is a business, and we've got to take care of one another. So I say that while I'm also saying we put everybody in a no-win situation by mixing a shoot in a working environment. That sucks. It goes back to the Brawl for All. Bad idea. Go back and listen to our Brawl for All episode. It was trying to do a shoot in a worked atmosphere. This is the same thing. And we were guilty as writers and creators to put that on the talent, and not good.
Well, what a crazy situation. It feels like Kurt had a lot happen in his career. Let's fast forward. Royal Rumble 2005. Kurt's in a triple threat against Layfield and Big Show. He's also in the Royal Rumble match. He enters at number 20 and is eliminated by Shawn Michaels, but then comes back and eliminates Michaels. Now, at the time, Kurt's on SmackDown, Michaels is on Raw. Whose idea was it to put these guys together? And I have to admit, if you're going to do that, the Royal Rumble's the right time to do it. Am I right?
Oh, sure, because that was the only time that the two brands mixed was at Royal Rumble and at WrestleMania. So it was one of those what-if situations when you're looking at a dream WrestleMania card, mixing the Raw and SmackDown brands. Good God, what a match Kurt Angle would have with Shawn Michaels.
Right.
So perfect time for him to cross paths. Royal Rumble, let's plant a seed. And that's how it started.
Kurt then starts doing segments to build to this Shawn Michaels match, and he brings back people from Shawn Michaels' past. He brings out Marty Jannetty, who he defeats, and then he does a segment with Shawn's old manager, Sherry Martel. And in doing this is kind of fun, and Bruce, I need your help on this. Kurt mocks Michaels' entrance music, changing some of the lyrics. So, kind of freestyle what the lyrics were when Kurt redid Shawn's theme.
I'm just a sexy Kurt. I'm not your boy Kurt. I'll make your ankle hurt. Something like that?
Something like that. There you go. So right after that, Kurt, of course, attacks Sherry and puts her in the ankle lock. And I'm sure rather than putting her in the ankle lock, he would rather be
spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my Sherry tonight.
Oh my gosh. Every now and again,
you know my Sherry's got me wrapped around her little finger, because you know that I would walk through hell and back to be with her. Okay, I'm done.
I'm not mad at you anymore. You made it better. Thank you. How much are you looking forward to our live show where you get to sing that song with everyone in the crowd? Because you know they're going to sing along.
I can't wait to be alone in Orlando on April 1st with Conrad and everybody that got tickets. I am psyched, and you may get a live concert that night. You never know. It's gonna be like, it's gonna be like Garth Brooks. When Garth starts singing and he just sings like a couple bars, and then the audience takes over from there. So hint, folks, that's what I'm looking for. So it'll be kind of like spend my days, and then you guys take it from there. Working hard on the go, and then I'll do. But and you finish it for me, okay? Y'all work on that, okay?
Where did the idea come from to involve Sherry and Jannetty? Would this have been a Vince idea?
No, it was a creative idea, kind of creative team where we thought about different ways that we could continue the issue on the separate shows without having to bring Shawn on SmackDown and Kurt on to Raw. And so you bring in people from Shawn's past and do it that way. That way you don't have to have Shawn and Kurt touch.
At the No Way Out, at the No Way Out 2005 pay-per-view, Kurt wrestles Cena, where the winner gets a title match at WrestleMania 21. Of course, Cena wins the match, and this is where Cena's rise really begins. But Kurt still had a phenomenal match. It won all kinds of awards, including Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Match of the Year for 2005, when he faced Shawn Michaels, finally, WrestleMania 21. And Kurt wins the match, making Michaels tap out to the ankle lock. Any memories of this match? And at this time, was dealing with Shawn a little easier than maybe it was years past? Did you have to sell him on doing the job here, or not so much?
No, not so much. It was a great match. Those two guys, two of the best businesses ever seen, and they flowed well together, and they deserved every accolade that they got from that match. But we had a different Shawn on our hands at this time than we had in the past. Shawn is a businessman and saw the right thing to do, and it worked. It was beautiful.
Hard to argue that match could be anything other than stellar. June 2000.
If that match had been held in the Tokyo Dome,
six stars. 6 stars.
Fucking A.
June of 2005, the draft is back, and this time Kurt is drafted 3rd overall to Raw. How far in advance did you guys plan these rosters prior to the drafts? Is this something that's planned months, weeks, days, hours ahead of time?
We would try to plan it weeks ahead of time. However, as the show gets closer, changes are still made all the way up until showtime. But we tried to have the big ones planned several weeks in advance, but it would change. It would change right up until showtime.
At Vengeance on June 26, Kurt's wrestling Shawn Michaels again, and this time Michaels gets his return win. Do you have a favorite of the two matches there at Vengeance and WrestleMania?
I like WrestleMania.
I think most people do. After this, Kurt starts working with Eugene, defeating him at SummerSlam, and then he finds himself back in the main event picture as he's challenging John Cena for the title at Unforgiven 05. Kurt wins by DQ, so of course Cena keeps the belt. At the Taboo Tuesday pay-per-view, once again, we see Kurt challenging for the title, this time in a triple threat with Cena and Shawn Michaels. Cena wins, pinning Michaels. How critical was it to the success of a young John Cena to be working so much with Kurt?
I think that it helped make Cena, because Kurt was an established star. But what you learned being in the ring with Kurt Angle was you learned not only moves, you learned how to wrestle, you learned logic, and you learned different ways to get in and out of holds and maneuvers, and different way to go into spots that I dare say were oftentimes more logical. So it was being under the learning tree, being in the ring, anytime you get in the ring with Kurt Angle. So that helped Cena tremendously with his in-ring work. And Cena gets a bad rap. I think Cena's a hell of a worker.
In January, Kurt would be asked to return to SmackDown, and during a battle royal to crown a new World Heavyweight Champion, Kurt is a surprise entrant coming over from Raw, and he ends up winning, last eliminating Mark Henry, and he becomes the new World Heavyweight Champ. Do you remember why you guys needed Kurt back on SmackDown at this point?
Familiarity. Kurt was a big star on SmackDown, and I think Vince just felt, well, maybe we need him back over here. SmackDown needed a little bit of help.
Royal Rumble 2006, Kurt defeats Mark Henry, retaining his world title, and then at No Way Out the following month, Kurt would defend the world title against The Undertaker. That match would end when Kurt pinned The Undertaker, but Taker had him in the triangle choke. So kind of a similar deal to the pewter thing. He enters WrestleMania 22 as the world champion, and he finds himself in a three-way match with Randy Orton and Rey Mysterio, and this is Mysterio's big moment. He becomes the world champion when he pins Orton. How much I'm sure we'll talk about it at another time, but how much controversy was there at the time to making Mysterio the champ? Because historically, when you think back to the golden era of the WWF, so to speak, it was a big man territory, and now you have a much smaller man in stature, but still a big-time performer in Rey Mysterio as your champ.
Well, hell, one of the original pitches was for Rey to beat Big Show. Because I would use the old Vince adage, well, pal, they'll believe it when they see it. It was a tough sell, but we did go back and use Eddie Guerrero as an example of a smaller guy being able to carry that championship. Rey had the charisma. Rey had the following. So let's go for it. Let's try it. The worst that can happen is, okay, they don't buy him and we've got to make a change fairly quickly. But I loved Rey Mysterio as a champion. It was my idea, so of course I loved it. But I thought Rey worked really well here. And it was a tough sell at first, but once Vince bought in, he bought in.
A few months after WrestleMania, ECW is brought back as a separate brand, and we're going to cover that in a big way in the future. But they take part of the May 29th draft, and they get 2 first-round picks. So Paul Heyman drafts Van Dam and Kurt Angle. Did Kurt volunteer to go to ECW? Why did you guys think that you needed Kurt in ECW?
To help give ECW credibility. And Kurt didn't necessarily volunteer. He was, Kurt, you're going to ECW. Okay. But Kurt took those kind of assignments as a challenge to help brand and to help make ECW credible and to bring it into the 2000s.
So at the One Night Stand pay-per-view, Kurt would defeat Randy Orton, and then they have a rematch the following month at Vengeance, and Orton gets his win in return. During a match in Westchester, New York, at an ECW show against Rob Van Dam, Kurt is injured pretty badly. He pulls his groin and actually pulls an ab muscle off of the bone, and later in the exact same match somehow manages to pull his hamstring. So he has to be helped out of the ring because he can't even move. So the next day at the MCI Center in D.C., Kurt goes to see Vince and actually pulls his pants down to show Vince how bad this looks. And supposedly he is completely black, hip to hip, all the way across, all the way down the front and the back. So he's in really, really bad shape. Do you remember this injury and this reveal of how bad he really was at this time?
I do. Kurt was in horrible shape, and he was showing everybody. He was just pulling his pants down, showing everybody. It was ugly. But Kurt was in rare form at that point, and he was in no shape to wrestle. But it was a situation where we started to see the seeds of some other stuff going on with Kurt that people became concerned with, as to how in the hell do you get to the point where you're tearing your hamstring, your groin, and your ab all in one match. That doesn't happen normally. So he was most likely on his way and had a lot of injuries leading up to that he may not have been taken care of properly before he got to the point of just no return.
I want to take a timeout right here to say that we've put Kurt Angle on our poll this week because he's going into the Hall of Fame, and there's a lot more interest in him, and we're in the business of pushing downloads. What we're not in the interest of doing is trying to shit on someone's big moment, take away from their limelight or their success. That is not what we're doing. But we are about to talk about some negative stuff. But I want everyone to be clear, this is a story of redemption. This is a good story. It has a happy ending. Kurt is on top of the world now. Not only is he happy and healthy, but he's finally getting his rightful spot in the WWE Hall of Fame. So everything we're about to talk about, which is part of the story, is not something we're doing to shit on him. And you can tweet me your hate tweets, but I'm going to stand on that because that's what really happened. He came through all of this. So Kurt wrestles his last match on August 8th, 2006 against Sabu. It's an ECW match. And then he asks for a meeting with Vince McMahon. And supposedly this meeting happens at Titan Towers. Do you recall this meeting, Bruce?
I recall the meeting. I was not there, but I do recall the tweets, not the tweets, the text messages going back and forth, and some of the phone calls back and forth between Kurt and Vince and John Laurinaitis and whoever else would listen. But Kurt was in a bad place. Kurt needed help. So while Kurt saw one thing, we were experiencing something completely different. Talent had come to us and expressed concern for Kurt Angle's well-being. They felt that Kurt was self-medicating and might be overdoing it. There was concern there. And as I stated and alluded to earlier, the injuries that Kurt had, those were the things that he probably had pulls and he probably had smaller tears that led to the big tears and the big injury to where he couldn't even walk again.
Right. Unless
we're informed of that and he's not showing any signs of any injury, you can't read people's minds. And if he was self-medicating and taking way too much stuff, which he has admitted to taking ungodly amounts of Vicodin and Somas, which are a muscle relaxer, that he was probably just masking the pain to the point he had no idea how injured he was because he didn't feel anything.
Specifically, 65 Vicodin a day. That's what he would claim that he was taking.
That's a lot of Vicodin to take in a week. That's a lot of Vicodin to take in a month. Think about that. That's a lot.
At the time, Kurt put something out that said, "My body is so beat up and run down, I can't even think straight. I need to heal my body and rehab. I've done this for too long without a break. I haven't been able to really enjoy my life. I haven't seen my families. I've had problems with medications. I'm just fried physically and mentally." And the article would claim, I guess his manager was involved in this, that this was mutual. And the WWE's website released a statement that says, due to personal issues, Kurt Angle has been granted an early release from his WWE contract. WWE looks forward to establishing a new relationship with Kurt in the near future. So, Kurt would make it real clear, quote, "Vince says when I'm ready, if I'm ever ready to come back, just sign on the dotted line. I'll tell you if I do return, I'm going back to my roots, training on the mat like my amateur days. Longevity is the key." This seems this seems unfortunate, but everybody goes into kind of PR spin mode, and that's not why they're listening to this. They want to know what really happened. And so Kurt at different times would put it out there that he wanted to go to rehab and wanted the time off to go to rehab, and that Vince told him no, and that he couldn't do that. I suspect from the WWE side of things, given what we've seen with Brian Pillman and other guys, the WWE asked him to go to rehab and he refused. What really happened?
That is what happened, because think about it. The WWE has sponsored talents that didn't even work for them to go through rehab to help them get their lives back and to help them with addiction, whether it be alcohol or pills, whatever it is. And we wanted Kurt to go to rehab. And I wasn't in talent relations at the time, but I did work very closely with Kurt at the time. We as a company wanted Kurt. We wanted the old Kurt. We wanted the Kurt that was coherent, the guy that worked his ass off, and no one wanted to see him go down that rabbit hole of drug addiction to where he may not come out. He was drinking heavily. He was taking a lot of pills, which, I know that from him telling me that. So the company wanted to get him fixed. The company had no interest in keeping him around unless he was to go into rehab, and not physical rehab, but a drug treatment rehab facility where he could get the kind of help that he needed to get him off of whatever it was that he was on so that he could come back a healthy, new and or old talent that he used to be. The the narrative that Kurt just wanted to go rehab himself and take some time off, unfortunately, doesn't hold a lot of water, because after he left and was granted his release because he refused to go to a company-sponsored rehab, he was working for TNA a month later.
Well, before we get there, let's mention that people inside the company were saying that he was showing up to events messed up way worse than Shawn Michaels or Brian Pillman were at their worst. And that he was one of the worst they'd ever seen. And it wasn't just the physical issues that he had, but now he had this mental aspect as well, because although it wasn't public, he was going through a divorce with his wife, Karen, and he had a 3-year-old daughter and another baby on the way. So there's a lot of other stuff going on. Just to kind of back up the WWE side here, though, Chris Masters had just returned to Raw after a stint in rehab for pain pills. Joey Mercury was doing outpatient rehab at this exact same time. Neither guy was fired. So it's unrealistic to believe that was necessarily the case. But when Angle ultimately walks away from this, he's walking away from $1 million a year. I mean, he's probably got $1 million downside guarantee. I know you're not going to give us anything on that, Bruce, but it's a big money deal. And it's worth mentioning that this is a weird time in the WWE, because the WWE has just rehired Jeff Hardy a couple of weeks before this. And Jeff had his own drug problems in the past. But I'm just putting it out there that the WWE is actively trying to work with folks who are trying to improve themselves, whether it is a Chris Masters or a Jeff Hardy. So it doesn't really hold water, so to speak, that they would have just shut him down like this.
Correct. And you kind of hit the nail on the head too. It wasn't just physical and the drug addiction. There was some stuff mentally caused by the drug addiction that I'm not sure Kurt even knows what the hell he said and or did a lot of the time throughout that period. He was not himself. He just wasn't thinking clearly. And people, once they convince themselves that something is true, you can't convince them otherwise. And that's the place that he was at. And it was unfortunate, but we wanted to make sure that he was right. We wanted to make sure that we had a healthy Kurt Angle on his hands, but it takes two to tango. And if Kurt wasn't willing to go to a company-sponsored rehab where we could monitor him and know that he was getting the help that he needed, then we really didn't have anything. So he wanted his release. We granted him his release because there was nothing more we could do with him at that point. And that also goes to show the amount of respect as well that Vince had for Kurt.
Because he didn't have to let him go.
He didn't have to let him go and give him that full release.
Well, he does do that. And, of course, it wasn't always the straight and narrow for Kurt after this. He had lots of problems. He wound up being arrested several times. He had several stints in rehab. But at least here, before he started with TNA, he says he just quit cold turkey. And that's not only dangerous, but very difficult to do, causing severe withdrawals and no telling what other kind of hell. But as you just said, Dixie makes the announcement the very next month that he has signed and he's coming in. And he would spend more time in TNA than he would in WWE, which is really baffling to me. But he's finally back. There's been lots of rumor and lots of innuendo. When's he going to be back? Welcome to the WWE family. Well, it happened, and he is going in. It's true. It's damn true. Kurt Angle is a WWE Hall of Famer. Is there anybody more deserving that you know of from that era who wasn't in?
What? Off the top of my head, I can't, but because I'm just so happy that Kurt Angle has finally taken his rightful place in a WWE Hall of Fame. He deserves it, and I'm just tickled pink for him.
We are too, and you're going to be tickled pink if you are the big winner of our T-shirt contest. We've been asking you to leave us reviews on iTunes. If you'll go ahead and leave us a review and screenshot it, and then just tweet it at the show, at Prichard Show, we're going to pick one lucky winner to get a free t-shirt. We're doing this again next week, so if you haven't already and you'd like one of these stylish t-shirts over at brucepritchard.com, and you get to take your pick, by the way, go ahead, check it out. You can get them on the low, and when you make one of those orders, Bruce Prichard will call and personally thank you. But you don't have to spend any money if you win our contest. Our big contest winner this week is
Sean Allen at Professor Waldo on Twitter. So Sean Allen at Professor Waldo, direct message us and give us your information, what t-shirt you'd like, and we'll get one out in the mail to you right away.
We still want those reviews. Go ahead, if you haven't already, please leave us a review on iTunes. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter. It's at Prichard Show, and that's where you need to be to shape the show. We put you in the driver's seat. We're going to give you a poll option, and you get to pick what's going to win. But if you really know what's going to win, then you need to place a bet. Am I right, Bruce?
Oh, hell yeah. And you can go to betwrestling.com, and you can actually bet real money on wrestling pay-per-views like this Sunday at the Royal Rumble in San Antonio. I mean, wagers can be as low as 50 cents. And you can learn more by going to betwrestling.com/Bruce. And there you can enter to win a free Something to Wrestle With t-shirt and a Road to WrestleMania Slam Crate. And one of these Slam Crates will win a trip for 2 to WrestleMania with tickets, airfare, hotel. And it's all at betwrestling.com/Bruce. Remember, bets as low as 50 cents. It's free to follow the odds at betwrestling.com, and bets can be placed right up until the bell rings for match time. So make the pay-per-view more interesting and go to betwrestling.com/Bruce this weekend.
And be sure to tune into our poll this weekend. During the Royal Rumble, the poll will go up. It'll be up all day Monday, and we want to hear from you. Here are next week's poll options. Option number 1, it's Super Bowl weekend next weekend, so why not talk about a Super Bowl stud and the time he main evented WrestleMania? It's WrestleMania 11, Bam Bam Bigelow versus Lawrence Taylor. What might we talk about if WrestleMania 11 wins the poll?
Well, how that story changed from conception to what we eventually ended up doing, and how we got Lawrence Taylor to commit to more time and a lot more involvement, and the involvement of all the NFL greats from Reggie White. It was a tremendous event, and it's apropos that we talk about that with all the football greats with Super Bowl Sunday.
Also coming up, it's Valentine's Day right around the corner. Be sure to check out proflowers.com and use that promo code WWE. But with Valentine's Day around the corner, we need to talk about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre pay-per-view. It's from February of 1999, and you may famously remember this is where Vince took on Stone Cold inside of a steel cage. What might we talk about if St. Valentine's Day Massacre wins the poll?
We're going to talk about why that was the last time you saw that big, ugly black, what we used to call Old Blue, that big, nasty, giant, unforgiving cage, and why that was the last time we ever saw that thing on a WWE pay-per-view, as well as the debut of a man that would become a major fixture in the WWE, The Big Show. And that was a hell of a pay-per-view.
Poll option number 3 has been on before, but it's time for a return because it's an anniversary of sorts. It's the NWO in the WWE with February right around the corner. This was something a lot of people have been talking about, the NWO in WWE. What might we talk about, Bruce?
Who was for bringing the NWO in? Who was against bringing the NWO in? What the storyline originally was, what it became, and why all the different machinations of that storyline had to take place.
You've told me some of the stuff kind of off air before about the NWO and WWE. That is a home run episode when we get the opportunity to do it. But it won't be next week because poll option number 4 is going to win, and it's going to be a runaway. It's the life and times of Superfly Jimmy Snuka. What might we talk about if Superfly wins the poll?
Superfly. Jimmy Snuka, I've known Jimmy since the 70s. We've been good friends. We're going to talk about his entire career, and yes, we will touch on some of the controversy surrounding Jimmy in his career, especially in later years. But I want to focus mainly on the good times and talking about the incredible career that was the Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
So there you have it. We want to hear from you. Go follow us on Twitter right now. It's at Prichard Show. Check us out during the Royal Rumble or anytime on Monday. We want to hear from you. And let's recap what we're running down. WrestleMania 11, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, the NWO and WWE, and Jimmy Superfly Snuka. We'll be back next week, and this will be our last poll for a week. Coming on February 10th, we're going to do the companion piece for the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary on the XFL. That's going to come out on the 2nd. So if you haven't already, set your DVRs, check out that 30 for 30 on the 2nd, and then tune in 8 days later on February 10th. We're going to have all things XFL here on Something to Wrestle With.
Bruce Prichard.
That's my line, asshole.
The Royal